Let's begin with you comfortable. Pillow arranged the way you like it, blanket pulled up, the light in the room down as low as it will go. There is nothing to follow closely tonight, and nothing you need to remember in the morning. If you fall asleep in the first 10 minutes, the night will carry on perfectly well without you. Tonight we are going into a Victorian house at the hour when most stories about Victorian houses stop. Almost everything written about this period happens in daylight. The morning calls, the shops, the dinner party, the servants moving through the passages, the children in the park with the nursemaid. Then the candles go out, and the narration politely withdraws, as though nothing happened between the last guest leaving and the first cup of tea. But something did happen. 8 or 9 hours of it, every single night, in every room of the house at once, and it took a remarkable amount of work. You have probably seen the picture that stands in for it. A brass bedstead in a clean, quiet room, white linen turned down in a crisp fold, a single candle on the washstand, throwing a soft circle of light. A woman in a long white nightgown, her hair loose over one shoulder, sleeping the sleep of a person with nothing on her mind. Rain on the window perhaps, a book left open, the whole thing lit like a painting, warm and still and hushed. Nearly every part of that is wrong, and the wrongest part is the temperature. The real Victorian night is cold, not chilly, cold in a way most of us have never slept in a bedroom where the water in the jug can skin over with ice by morning, and where the whole point of your nightcap is that your head is genuinely at risk of being cold all night. It is also crowded. Children share a bed, servants share a bed, and nobody in the house thinks this is worth mentioning. It is busy because people get up in the night, and the house has no plumbing above the ground floor, and someone is always coughing. And it is managed minutely, expensively, by hand, according to written rules about bedding, ventilation, hours, light, and cost, which were printed in household manuals and followed with real seriousness. So that is where we are going. One full night in one house, from the moment the front door is locked and the shutters are drawn, to the moment the first fire of the morning is lit in a cold grate. We are going to move through every floor of the building, from the drawing room to the nursery to the attic, and look at what is actually in the beds and who put it there. We are going to count the layers. We are going to work out what a night's warmth cost in coal and what a night's light cost in candles, in real money, from real household accounts. We will look at what people did when they woke at 2 in the morning and found the house dark and the night only half spent. We will go into the sick room, briefly and gently. We will look out of a landing window at 3 o'clock and see how many other people in the city are awake and working while you are not. And we will end where every Victorian day actually began, which is not with the mistress of the house getting up, but with someone else getting up 2 hours earlier so that the mistress could pretend the morning had made itself. If this is the sort of thing you like falling asleep to, subscribing does help, and I would genuinely like to know where you are listening from and what time it is there. People tell me, and the answers are always stranger and further away than I expect. Now let the room go quiet. Let your shoulders come down, and let us go back 150 years or so. It is the 12th of November, in the year 1878. The place is London, and specifically, it is Bloomsbury, one of those long terraces of flat-fronted brick houses standing shoulder to shoulder, with iron railings at the front and a well of steps going down to the basement door. Your house is 5 stories, if you count generously, and everyone does. There is a basement with the kitchen and scullery. There is a ground floor with the dining room at the back and the hall running through. There is a first floor given over almost entirely to the drawing room, with the tall windows and the best furniture, which is where the family's public face lives. There is a second floor with the bedrooms. And above that, up a narrower flight, there is a third floor with the nursery. And above that again, up a flight narrower still and uncarpeted, there are two small rooms under the slope of the roof, where the servants sleep. The house is warm at the bottom and cold at the top, and that gradient is not an accident. It is the shape of the household's money, laid out vertically, one floor at a time. You are 35 years old. You are married to a solicitor with a practice off Chancery Lane, a man of no particular grandeur and no insecurity about it either, who leaves the house at 8:30 and comes back at 7. You have 3 children living. The eldest is 9, the middle one is 6, and the youngest is not quite 3. All 3 of them sleep in one room on the 3rd floor, and this is normal, and it is also warmer that way. You keep 3 servants, a cook, who is the oldest of the 3 and the least easily replaced, a housemaid, who is 22 and does the fires, the water, the stairs, the steps, the grates, the boots, the beds, and rather more besides, and a nursemaid, who is 19 and sleeps in the night nursery with the children, in a bed placed there for that purpose, because it is understood that the children may need someone in the night, and it is not going to be you. The household runs on something in the region of £700 a year. That is a comfortable figure for 1878. It is not a rich one. It puts you a long way above the clerk on £140, who keeps no servant at all, and whose wife does everything with her own 2 hands. It puts you an unimaginable distance below the households with 14 servants and a carriage and a house in the country. And it means that almost every decision made in this building is a real decision, with a price attached, and that most of those decisions are made by you. Out of that 700, the rent takes something like 70 or 80. The 3 servants' wages together come to perhaps 50 or 60 pounds a year, all in, plus their food and their beds and their beer money. Coal takes several pounds a year, and more in a bad winter. Candles, oil, matches, soap and starch each have their own small line. So does the laundress, who comes in, and the sweep, who comes twice a year, and the man who empties what needs emptying. You know all of these numbers. You write them into a ruled book on the 1st floor, and you total them at the end of the month. And the book is one of the very few places in the world where your work is recorded at all. Here is the thing about tonight that most people get wrong, and it is worth saying plainly before we go any further, because everything else in this house follows from it. Sleep, in 1878, is not a private and natural event that happens to a person once the day is over. It is a piece of household engineering. Every hour of rest in this building has to be built, in advance, out of materials that cost money, and out of labor that somebody performs. The warmth has to be carried up the stairs in a scuttle and lit, or else carried up in a metal pan of embers and pushed between the sheets. The water has to be carried up too, in cans, by hand, from a tap in the basement, and carried down again afterwards in a different vessel that nobody talks about. The light has to be bought by the pound and the gallon, and then rationed. The mattresses have to be turned every morning, and shaken out and beaten, and once a year unpicked and re-teased like wool. The linen has to be washed, and washing linen in 1878 is not an afternoon's inconvenience, but a 2-day operation involving a copper, a mangle, and hands in hot water for hours. The bedsteads have to be inspected with a candle along their joints every week, because the alternative is unthinkable in a respectable house. Add all of that up, and you get a household in which producing 6 or 7 hours of unremarkable sleep for 6 people requires the coordinated effort of most of the building, most of the day. And nearly all of that effort is female. The housemaid carries it up the stairs. The nursemaid absorbs the night. The cook governs the range, which governs the hot water, which governs everything. And you, from the first floor, hold the whole arrangement in your head. What needs airing? What needs turning? Which bed has a damp sheet? Whether tonight is cold enough to justify a fire in a bedroom? How many candles are left in the store cupboard? And who last had the key to it? None of the 4 of you will appear in the account book by name. The book records coal, wages, soap, meat, and rent. It does not record the fact that a woman went up 4 flights with a can of hot water 11 times in one day, or that another woman lay awake listening to a child's breathing and decided it was nothing. The house will be described, later, by people who did not live in it, as comfortable. That comfort is a manufactured product, and tonight we are going to watch it being manufactured, floor by floor, from the outside in. It is 9:30 in the evening. The lamps are lit in the drawing room. There is a fine, cold rain coming down on the pavement outside, the kind that makes the gaslight on the street look softer than it is, and somewhere below you, the housemaid is beginning to move through the ground floor with the shutters. The house is about to be shut for the night. Let us go and shut it. The shutters go first, and they go from the front of the house inward. In the dining room, the housemaid unfolds them out of their reveals, 2 leaves to each window, hinged and painted the same dead white as the frame, and brings them together across the glass with a soft wooden knock. An iron bar swings down into its catch. The sound of the street stops in stages as she works, and you can hear it stopping from where you sit. First, the wheels go, the wet grind of a cab on the road outside. Then the voices, the 2 men walking north who have been arguing amiably about somebody's brother for the length of the terrace. Then the rain itself, which had been audible against the window as a kind of hissing, becomes nothing at all. It is a peculiar thing to notice, once you have noticed it. A room with the shutters closed does not merely go dark. It goes quiet in a way that changes how your own voice sounds in it, and the change is not small. Speak in the drawing room at 9 in the evening, with the shutters open and the words go outward and thin. Speak after they are barred, and the words come back to you a little, off the wood and the wool and the plaster. The house becomes an interior, in the full sense of the word, only at this hour. All day it has been leaking into the street. Now it stops. Behind the shutters come the curtains, and the curtains are the serious business. Yours are wool rep, a heavy ribbed weave the color of dried moss, lined and interlined, hung on wooden rings from a pole above the window, with a pelmet across the top, to shut off the draught that would otherwise pour down between curtain and glass. They are heavy enough that the housemaid draws them with 2 hands. Nobody in this house believes that curtains are decorative. A single glazed sash window in a London terrace in November is a hole in the wall with cold air standing behind it, and every layer put across that hole, shutter, lining, wool, is worth a measurable number of degrees to whoever is sitting nearest. That is the whole logic of the house at night, and it is worth walking the building to feel it. The drawing room, 1st floor front, with the fire kept up since 4 in the afternoon, is comfortable in a narrow radius. Within 4 feet of the grate, you would call the air warm. At the far wall, by the door, it is noticeably less so. Move out onto the landing, and the temperature drops as if you had opened a window, because in effect you have. The stairwell of a 5-story house is a chimney with steps in it. Warm air rises off the ground floor, climbs the well, and delivers itself to the underside of the roof, where it cools against the slates and comes back down along the walls. Standing on the second landing at 9:30, you can feel a slow, cold current on the back of your neck, moving downward, while your ankles are in a draft, moving upward. Higher again, on the way to the nursery floor, the cold stops being a draft and becomes simply the temperature. The air up here has not been warmed by anything at all today. A thermometer on the wall of the top landing in November would show something in the low 40s on the Fahrenheit scale, and it would show the same at 11 at night as at 5 in the morning, because there is nothing in this part of the house that produces heat except the people asleep in it. The smells sort themselves out by floor as well. Downstairs, coal smoke, which is not the same smell as a coal fire. The fire smells of hot iron and burning, and the smoke that has settled into the curtains and the carpet over a season smells sour and faintly greasy and washes out of nothing. On the stairs, lamp oil, from the paraffin lamp on the half landing, which is a warm smell, not unpleasant, slightly sweet. Under both of those, at the top of the house, the smell of damp plaster and cold soot, which is the smell of a room with a chimney nobody has lit for weeks. The flue draws whether or not there is a fire in the grate below it, and what it draws down is the outside of the roof. Consider what it would take to change that, because this is where the arithmetic of a Victorian night actually lives. Coal comes into this house through a round iron plate in the pavement outside the railings. The merchant's man tips it from a sack down the hole into the cellar, and it is measured in 100-weight sacks, 12 of them to the ton, 112 pounds to the sack. In London in the late 1870s, you would pay somewhere between 20 and 26 shillings a ton, delivered, depending on the season, the quality, and how honest your merchant is about the weight. Call it a shilling and a few pence for each 100-weight sack, which sounds like very little until you count the sacks. The kitchen range burns every day of the year, including August, because it is the only source of hot water and cooked food in the building, and a range in constant use will take something in the region of 1/2 weight a day. Add the dining room grate in the morning and the drawing room grate from the afternoon onward, and in a cold week, a household of this size can burn 400 or 500 weight, sometimes more when the weather turns hard. Over a full year, a house like this one accounts for perhaps 4 or 5 tons, and the coal bill sits in the account book at somewhere around 5 or 6 pounds annually, more if the winter is long. Now put a fire in a bedroom and watch what it costs. The coal itself is the cheapest part. 1/2 weight is 56 pounds of weight that has to be carried out of the cellar, along the passage, and up 4 flights of stairs in a scuttle by a young woman who has already climbed those stairs a great many times today with water. The grate must be cleared of yesterday's ash before it can be laid. The fire must be laid, which means paper, wood, and a careful arrangement of small coal, and then lit, and then watched for the first 10 minutes so that it takes. The ash must be carried down again in the morning, and the hearth swept, and the fender blacked, and the chimney swept properly 2 or 3 times a year rather than once, because a chimney in use fouls faster than a chimney standing idle. A bedroom fire is not the price of a sack of coal. It is the price of a sack of coal plus roughly 40 minutes of somebody's labor at each end of it, in a house where labor has already been fully committed elsewhere since 6 in the morning. Which is why, in the overwhelming majority of houses like this one, bedrooms are not heated, not out of hardiness, and not out of meanness, though a good many mistresses were mean about it. The advice literature of the period is unembarrassed on the point. A fire in a bedroom is understood as a medical measure, not a comfort. You light one when somebody is genuinely ill and must be kept warm through the night. You light one in a lying-in room where the doctors of the day insisted on steady heat as a matter of course. You light one, perhaps, in a room where a guest of standing is sleeping, because to do otherwise would say something about you that you would rather not have said. Otherwise, the grate in a bedroom stands swept and empty from April to April, with a paper fan folded in it in summer, and the family sleeps in air at 45 degrees and thinks nothing of it, because they have never slept in anything else. There is a line the manuals like, which you have read and half believe. Cold air in the bedroom is wholesome, and warm air is enervating. It is convenient that the wholesome option is also the cheap one. Most household rules that survive for a century have that shape. So you go up at 9:45 with a candle to look at the bedroom door. It is a habit rather than a decision most nights. The handle is cold under your hand. You open the door a few inches, and the air that comes out at you is the air of an unheated room in November, still and dense, smelling of the wax on the chest of drawers. The window has been shut since morning. The bed has been made since 8, and the stone bottle is not in it yet. Standing in the doorway, you make a small calculation you would not describe as a calculation, how cold the landing was, whether the rain has turned to sleet, whether you were shivering last night at 2 in the morning, or merely aware of the cold, whether the coal in the cellar will last to the end of the month at the rate it is going, and whether the merchant's next delivery is Thursday or the Thursday after. Not tonight, you decide. The blankets, the shawl at the foot of the bed, the stone bottle from the kitchen, and the nightcap will do what a fire would do, at no cost beyond a kettle already boiling for other reasons. You pull the door to and leave it ajar an inch, so the room can borrow a little warmth off the stairwell before you come up to it. There is an order to the rest of the evening, and everyone in the house knows it without being told. The nursery goes first, and it goes without you. Upstairs, the nursemaid is already at it, and has been since 9:15. The 2 youngest washed and into their nightgowns. The eldest allowed her extra half hour and then sent up under protest. You will go and see them, but you will go afterward, when the work is done and the room is quiet, which is a distinction that matters. Then prayers, at 10, in the dining room, with the servants standing at the back. Then the locking up, which is not one act but a sequence, and which is the last thing anyone does downstairs. Then the attic, for the cook and the housemaid, up a flight of stairs you have not climbed in some years. And then, last of all, this room, and the long business of getting out of a day's clothing by candlelight. Downstairs, the housemaid has reached the last window in the back parlor. You hear the shutter come across, and the bar drop into its catch, and then, for the first time since 6 o'clock this morning, the house is entirely closed. The last hour before prayers belongs to the drawing room, and it is the nearest thing to rest you will have until you are actually in bed. Your husband has the newspaper and the fire, and the better chair, and by 9:30 he has stopped reading aloud the parts he finds absurd. You have the work basket. There is a shirt collar that wants turning, which is a small economy but a real one, since turning a collar costs an evening, and buying a shirt costs 6 or 7 shillings. There are 2 stockings to be darned, and a nightgown of the middle child's to be let down at the hem, because she has grown 3 inches in a year, and there is no reason to buy new flannel for the sake of 3 inches. You work close to the lamp. This is not sentiment about thrift. It is that the light is only good within about 2 feet of the shade, and everything beyond that is a warm brown dimness in which you can see shapes and not stitches. At 9:45, you put the work away in its bag, because it is understood that needlework does not continue through prayers, and you take 5 minutes with the household book. The book is ruled in columns, and the columns are in your hand. Meat, 3 shillings and 4pence. Bread and flour. Milk, from the dairy in the next street, entered daily. The housemaid's errand money accounted for down to the halfpenny, because she brings back the change, and the change is checked, not because she has ever been short, but because that is how the system is built. Coal, when the load comes. Candles and oil, entered under lights, which is a heading you will come back to in a moment, because the whole subject of how this house is lit after dark is a subject in its own right, and it explains a good deal about where in the building people are permitted to be at 11 o'clock at night. Consider what you are burning this evening. The ground floor has gas. The hall has a single bracket, turned down at this hour to a small blue bead of flame, no bigger than a pea, enough to show the newel post and the umbrella stand and no more. The dining room has a 2-branch fitting over the table, lit for dinner and put out at 9:15. The drawing room has gas at the chimney breast, though tonight you have preferred the paraffin lamp on the table, because gaslight is unkind to the eyes at close work, and it is easier to sit within the small circle of a lamp than under the flat, hissing brightness of a jet. Gas is cheap. That is the thing to hold on to. The company charges somewhere around 4 shillings and 6pence for 1,000 cubic feet, and one ordinary burner eats about 4 or 5 cubic feet in an hour, which means that keeping a single jet alight for an hour costs a fraction of a penny, perhaps 1/4 of one. A wax candle, by comparison, costs 3pence, weighs 1/6 of a pound, and gives you 7 or 8 hours of a light, so much dimmer that you would need a dozen of them standing in a row to match one gas jet. Set the 2 side by side, and the arithmetic is not close. Gas is the cheapest light this century has produced, and it is also, in the year 1878, still confined, in most houses of your kind, to the floors where visitors are received. There are reasons for that, and only one of them is money. Running the pipes up through a house is an expense and a mess, and landlords resist it, and yours is a leasehold. Gas smells, faintly and constantly, of coal and of something else that people of your generation describe as being like a room with the windows shut too long. It blackens ceilings. It tarnishes silver, and it turns the gilding on a picture frame dull within a year. It makes people's heads ache in a small room, and every doctor and every household manual you have ever read agrees that whatever else you do not sleep in a room where a flame has been burning up the air all evening. The bedrooms of this house have never had gas, and you have never wished for it there, and neither has anyone else who has thought about it for 2 minutes. So above the ground floor, light means what light has always meant. Candles and oil, carried by hand, in quantities that are counted. The candles in the house are of 3 kinds. In the drawing room, on the mantelpiece for emergencies, there is a small box of wax, at about 1 shilling and 6pence the pound, which is what you put out for guests and for the dinner table, and which burns clean and upright and does not need attending to. For every day, upstairs, there are composites, hard and white and a little brittle, at something like 7 pence or 8 pence the pound, which do most of the household's real work. And in the kitchen drawer, for the scullery and the cellar steps and the coal hole, there are still a few tallow dips, at 5 pence or 6 pence, which smell of mutton fat when they burn, gutter into a hollow if you look away, and want their wicks snuffed every 20 minutes, or they will drown themselves in their own grease. Tallow is what the whole country lit itself with, within your mother's memory. In this house it has been demoted to the back stairs. The oil is paraffin, at about £1 a gallon, which is a modern price, and a very low one, and it is the reason the lamp on your table gives a better light than your mother had at your age. It is also the reason the lamp is the housemaid's least favorite object in the house, since every morning the chimney must be washed, the wick trimmed dead level with scissors, the reservoir filled, the burner wiped, and any spill got up at once. And there is a rule about all of it, which is not written down anywhere, but which everyone in the house obeys. 1 light per person, going up, no candle left burning in an empty room, ever, no light at all in a room nobody is using, whatever the hour. When the family has gone up, the drawing-room gas is turned off at the tap and not merely turned down. The candle ends, when they are too short to stand, belong to the housemaid, which is a perquisite of the post, and one she counts as part of what she is paid, and she will use them in her attic, where a whole candle would be an extravagance she has not been offered. At 10 o'clock, prayers. You go into the dining room. Your husband stands at the end of the table with the prayer book, and the 4 of you who live upstairs are seated, and the servants come up from the kitchen and stand at the back, near the door, in the order they always stand in, the cook first, then the housemaid, then the nursemaid, who has come down for the 10 minutes it takes, and who is listening with half her attention for the floor above her head. A short reading, a collect, the Lord's Prayer, spoken together, and the 3 voices at the back of the room are the ones you can hear most distinctly, because they are the ones nearest the door. The whole thing takes 8 minutes. It is, if you count it honestly, the only occasion in the 24 hours when every single person under this roof is in one room at one time, facing the same direction, doing the same thing. The manuals recommend it warmly for exactly that reason, and they are not being cynical when they do. It marks the end of the working day for the kitchen as clearly as a bell. Once prayers are over, the cook is entitled to go up. Then the locking up, which is a sequence, and which your husband does with the housemaid following him. The front door first, the lock, then the top bolt, then the bottom bolt, then the chain. The area gate at the bottom of the front steps, which is padlocked from the inside. The back door into the garden, bolted top and bottom. The scullery window, which has a catch that has never fitted properly and is wedged. The coal cellar flap under the pavement, which cannot be bolted at all and is therefore weighted from beneath with a stone that has to be lifted off every time coal is delivered. Then the plate. The forks and spoons have been washed and dried and counted, and they are counted again into their baize-lined baskets, and the number is known without being read off a list, because the number has been the same since before either of you was married. The baskets go into the cupboard under the stairs, and the cupboard is locked, and the key goes onto the ring you carry. On the ring, there are also the keys to the linen press, the store cupboard where the tea and sugar and candles live, and the tea caddy itself, which locks, because tea, at 2 shillings and 6 pence the pound, is worth locking up. The wine cellar key is your husband's and stays in his pocket. It would be easy to describe this as suspicion, and easy to feel a little uncomfortable about it, and it is worth being accurate instead. The plate is counted every night in a house where nobody has ever been accused of anything. Everyone involved knows that the counting is what makes it possible for 3 young women to live in a house full of portable silver without any question ever being asked about any of them. If something were mislaid and no count existed, the question would have to be asked, and it would fall on them and not on you. The housemaid, who is 19 and has a character reference from her last place that she keeps folded in her box, has more to lose from a missing spoon than you do, and she knows precisely where every spoon is. The ritual protects her. It also, quietly and permanently, reminds her of her position. Both of those things are true at once, and neither cancels the other. The lock turns. The key goes on the ring. The ring goes into your pocket, where it will sit on the washstand overnight, within reach of your hand. And then the house, which has spent the day being one connected place, comes apart into layers. The basement goes cold and dark, and stays that way until 5:30. The ground floor is shut, gas off, fire banked and guarded. The first floor is yours. The third floor is the children and the young woman who sleeps in the room with them. Above that, up the last flight, is the attic, where 2 candles are already going, and where nobody from your half of the house will set foot tonight. Light rises through this building floor by floor, and it gets smaller as it climbs. The stairs to the 3rd floor are narrower than the ones below them, and the carpet stops halfway up. There is a strip of drugget on the lower treads, worn pale down the middle, and above that, bare boards with the nail heads showing. Nobody who matters is expected to come this far, so nobody spent money on the way up. You carry the candle in your right hand and keep your left on the rail, because the turn at the top is tight and the shade on the candle throws more shadow than light. The day nursery is on your left, and its door stands open onto a room that has already begun to go cold. The fire there was let down at 7, and the guard is across it, and the last of the warmth is going up the chimney the way it has every evening this winter. In the dark, you can make out the long table pushed against the wall, the slate propped on the ledge, the rocking horse with one ear rubbed bald. The room smells of bread and milk, of yellow soap, of wool that has been dried too close to a fender. That particular smell is the smell of children in 1878, and it is the same in a solicitor's house in Bloomsbury as it is in a farmhouse in Dorset, which is one of the very few things that can be said of both. The night nursery is the room opposite, and it is the fullest room in the house. There is an iron cot with drop sides against the far wall for the youngest, who is 2.5. There is a small iron bedstead for the boy, who is 5. There is a larger bed against the chimney breast for the eldest, who is 7 and has lately begun to point out, at dinner, that she is nearly 8. And there is a 4th bed between the door and the window, and that one belongs to the young woman who looks after all 3 of them. Her bed is in this room by design. It is not there because the house has run out of space. It is there because her position requires it. A nursemaid in a household of this size sleeps where the children sleep, and that arrangement is written into the terms of her employment as plainly as her wage is, though nobody wrote it down. When you engaged her, you did not say, "And you will spend every night in the same room as 3 young children and get up to them as often as they need you." You said, "The place was in the nursery." She understood. At this hour, the routine is nearly finished, and it has been running since 6:30. The youngest went first and went hard, the way very small children do, straight from noise into sleep, with almost nothing in between. The 2 older ones were washed at the stand in the corner, in water, carried up 3 flights in a can, earlier in the day, and warmed with a kettle on the nursery hob. The manuals are firm that the water should be tepid rather than hot, that the face and neck and hands and feet be done thoroughly, and that the child be dried properly, rather than left damp in a cold room. Hair is brushed out, and the girl's is plaited, so it will not be a knotted misery in the morning. Then prayers, kneeling, said quickly by the boy and slowly by his sister, who has recently discovered that she can stretch this part of the evening out. The nightgowns have been hanging over the fire guard for the last quarter of an hour, and this is the small piece of engineering that makes the whole thing bearable. The guard is a tall wire frame fixed to the wall on either side of the grate, so that it cannot be pulled over, and it does 2 jobs. It keeps a child out of the fire, and it warms the linen that the child is about to put on. Getting a 5-year-old into a cold calico nightgown in a room at 50 degrees is a fight. Getting him into a warm one is not. Every experienced nurse in the country knows this, and no advice book mentions it, because advice books are written about children, and this is a piece of knowledge about the people who handle them. Once they are in bed, the fire is let go, and the guard is checked again, and the nightlight is lit. It is one of the squat wax ones, sold in boxes for exactly this purpose, and it stands in a saucer with a little water in the bottom, so that when it burns down to nothing, it will drown itself, instead of finding something to catch. The point of the nightlight is not really the child. The child, once asleep, does not care. The point is the young woman who will need to see her way across the room several times before morning without striking a match, and the fact that a wax light of this kind will burn quietly for 8 or 9 hours without needing to be touched. Which brings us to what she is actually paid. She is 22. She earns £16 a year, paid quarterly, £4 at a time, with her board and lodging, her tea and sugar found, and a length of print in the summer for a working dress. That is a fair rate in London this year for a young woman in a small household with 3 children and no upper nurse above her. It works out at something a little over £1 a day, which is roughly what a labourer's wife might pay for a week's bread. Out of it, she sends money home, and she buys her own boots, and boots are the great expense of a life spent on stairs. Her hours are these. She is up by 6, or a little after, because the youngest is up by 6. She has the 3 of them all day, and with them the nursery housework, the grate, the sweeping, the small linen, the water fetched up, the slops carried down, the meals brought from the kitchen, and the plates taken back to it. Her afternoon out is 1 a week, from 3 until 9 if the house can spare her, and every second Sunday she goes to church, and then, at 10:30, when the day she is paid for has notionally ended, she puts out the candle and lies down 8 feet from a 2-year-old. Nothing in her wage covers the night. It is not overtime, and it is not a separate duty. It is folded so completely into the job that nobody in 1878, including her, would think to describe it as work. If the youngest wakes at 2 in the morning, she gets up. If the boy is frightened, she gets up. If a child is unwell, she sits with that child, and in the morning she is expected on her feet at 6 as usual, because the day does not adjust itself to accommodate the night. In the arithmetic of a household, 1 servant sleeping in the nursery is what allows a mistress on the floor below to be a light sleeper rather than a permanently exhausted one. That transfer of rest from one woman to another is the quietest transaction in the entire building, and it does not appear in any account book because nothing changes hands. The advice literature has a great deal to say about children's sleep and almost nothing to say about that. What it prescribes is hours, and it prescribes them by age. An infant should sleep for the greater part of the day and night. A child of 2 or 3 wants 12 hours and should be in bed by 6 or 7 and up early. From 5 to 7, 11 hours is the figure most often given. From 7 upward, 10. Early to bed, early up, and a firm view that a child kept out of bed to amuse adults in the evening is being damaged rather than indulged. On the bed itself, the manuals are more emphatic still, and their central instruction runs directly against what a fond parent might choose. No feather beds for children. A feather bed is too soft and too hot, it is said, to relax the frame and encourage a crooked spine, and it holds the child in a hollow of its own warmth all night. Horsehair, or straw, or wool flock, firm and flat, with light covering rather than heavy. The cot should stand clear of the wall and clear of the fire. It should not be curtained, and there should be one bed to one child wherever the household can manage it, so that each sleeps in his own air. That last recommendation is the one that quietly sorts the country by income. Your household can comply with it. There are 3 sleeping places in this room for 3 children, and you were able to buy the second iron bedstead last spring without any particular thought. In the greater part of England, in this year, that instruction is being read by nobody who could act on it. And in the houses where it is being followed as a matter of expenditure rather than of virtue, however much the manuals prefer to speak of habits. The window at the end of the room is open an inch at the top, and it will stay open because on this one point the nursery follows the reformers rather than the older instinct. There is a rolled cloth along the sill to stop the draught running at floor level, and it works well enough. Your good-night round takes about 4 minutes. The eldest is still awake and wants to know whether tomorrow is the day of the visit, and is told that it is, and is told twice more before she believes it. The boy is already gone, on his side with one arm out of the covers, and you put the arm back, and he does not stir. The youngest, in the cot, has both fists up by her ears, the way she has slept since she was born. At the door, the young woman says good night, ma'am, in the low voice everyone in this room has learned to use, and she is already unhooking her collar as you turn away. Tomorrow, at breakfast, she will tell you how the night went, because she will know, and you will not. She always knows. She can tell you which of them woke, and for how long, and whether it was worth mentioning, and this daily report is the only form in which the labor of her nights ever reaches you. You leave the door ajar, a hand's width, so the sound will carry to the landing. Behind it, 3 children breathe at 3 different speeds, and the nightlight floats in its saucer of water, burning very small. The nursery landing is the last place in this house that is furnished for comfort. Above it, the stairs change character. The carpet stops at the top step, held down by a brass strip, and beyond that the treads are bare boards, narrower than the ones below, turning twice in a space that will not let 2 people pass. There is no gas up here, and there never will be. Whoever goes up carries their own light, and whoever comes down in the morning does it in the dark, one hand on the wall, counting. You will not go up there tonight. In 11 years of marriage and 2 houses, you have gone up perhaps a dozen times, and never for long. But the two women who sleep at the top of this house are going up now, one behind the other, and it is worth following them, because a great deal of what happens in this building at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning is decided by the conditions of that room. The cook goes first, with a candle in a flat tin holder. She is 41, and she climbs these stairs the way a person climbs stairs they have long since stopped noticing. The housemaid, 19, follows with the second candle and a can of water she has carried from the scullery, because water does not arrive at the top of a house by any means except a woman's arm. At the turn of the stair, the air changes, and the change is not subtle. Heat has been rising through this house all evening, but it stops at the ceiling of the floor below and goes out through the roof, and the attic sits above the last of it in a pocket of cold that smells of dust, whitewash, and old plaster. The door at the top opens inward into a room shaped by the roof. On one side, the ceiling comes down at a slant to about the height of a chair back, and the wall on that side is not a wall so much as a slope you learn not to stand under. There is one window, small, set into the slope, and a person of ordinary height can only look out of it by stooping. The glass has been painted around its edges by frost more than once this month. The floor is bare boards, scrubbed pale, with a narrow strip of matting laid where feet come down out of bed. Whitewash on the walls, done in the spring, already grey where the roof leaks a little at the join. There is a fireplace. It is not used. Somebody, some previous household, filled the grate with a board and a sheet of paper cut to fit, and nobody has taken it out since, because there is no arrangement in this house under which a fire would be lit in it. Coal does not climb 4 flights for the comfort of servants. This is not cruelty, and nobody in the building experiences it as cruelty. It is simply the settled shape of things, and one of the reasons the housemaid goes to bed in a flannel petticoat over her nightgown from October until March. Now the furniture, because the furniture is the whole biography of the arrangement. One iron bedstead, painted, with a mattress of flock. One washstand, deal, with a jug and basin, a soap dish, and a slop pail underneath. One chair, cane-seated, missing part of the cane. 3 hooks on the back of the door for the day's clothes. A small looking-glass, about the size of a book, propped where the light from the window falls on it in the morning, and a box. The box matters more than any of the rest. It is a wooden trunk, corded, with the initials of its owner in brass tacks on the lid, and it holds everything the housemaid possesses in the world. 2 print dresses for morning work, a black one for the afternoon, aprons, caps, collars, a shawl, stockings, a Sunday hat kept in paper, a workbox with needles and thread, a Bible, a bundle of letters from home tied with tape, and a small tin that holds whatever money she has not sent to her mother. She has been in service 5 years, and everything she owns still fits in a box 2 feet long, because everything she owns has to be capable of leaving a house at a month's notice. Beside the candlestick, on the washstand, there is a saucer with 3 candle ends in it. That saucer is a small institution. Servants are allowed candles as part of their keep, but not without limit, and in most careful households, the allowance is 1 candle a week for the bedroom, with the understanding that the ends of the household's used candles come upstairs as well and are burned down to nothing. The housekeeping manuals of the period discuss this with great seriousness. The reason light is rationed is partly cost, since even tallow candles have to be bought by the pound and wax candles cost several times more, but it is also fear. A candle carried into a room with a sloping ceiling, low beams, and a straw or flock mattress is a genuine hazard, and every mistress of a household in 1878 has read at least one account of a house lost because a girl fell asleep reading. So the rule in most houses, and the rule in this one, is that the candle is put out as soon as the wearer is in bed. Reading in bed is not forbidden in writing. It is simply made impossible by arithmetic. Both women sleep in this room, not in the same bed, in this house, because there are two bedsteads, and the second is against the far slope. But there are a great many houses in London tonight where a cook and a housemaid share a mattress, and neither of them thinks about it at all. It is worth slowing down on this, because it is one of the details that a modern listener trips over, and a Victorian would not have registered as a detail at all. Sharing a bed was ordinary. It was ordinary between siblings, between children and nursemaids, between two servants, between travellers at an inn, between a girl and her aunt on a visit, between apprentices in a shop. A bed was an expensive object, the most expensive piece of furniture most households owned, and the space to put one in was more expensive still. The idea that a person of modest means should expect a bed to themselves is not an ancient human instinct. It is a comparatively recent expectation produced by rising incomes, more rooms, and cheaper mass-produced bedsteads, and in 1878 it is arriving unevenly from the top of the social scale downward. Two servants to a bed reads to us as hardship. To them it reads as warmth in a room with no fire, and if either of them had grown up in a cottage or a two-room lodging, she would have slept with 2 or 3 sisters and thought nothing of it whatever. Now the money, because the money explains the room. The housemaid is paid £14 a year. It is handed to her in quarterly instalments, £3 and 10 shillings at a time, on the quarter days, and out of it she buys her own dresses, her own aprons, her boots, her stamps, and anything she sends home. The cook has £28, being older, skilled, and difficult to replace. Those two figures, and the wage of the young woman upstairs in the nursery, are what you and your husband refer to as the servant's cost, and they add up to something under £70 in a household running on 800. But wages are only the visible part of the transaction. The other part is called board and lodging, and it is worth real money. Contemporary estimates put the value of feeding and housing a servant somewhere near £20 a year, which is to say more than the housemaid receives in cash. She eats 4 times a day at this household's expense. She has this bed, this box, this washstand, and a roof, and she has coal for the kitchen range she works at, if not for the grate she sleeps beside. If she is ill for a week, she is fed anyway. This is the bargain of living in, and it is why a girl in service in Bloomsbury with £14 a year is not straightforwardly poorer than a girl in a workshop in Clerkenwell earning 11 shillings a week, who must pay rent out of it and find her own coal and her own dinner, and who will earn nothing at all in the weeks when the trade is slack. What living in costs her instead is time, every hour of it. There is no arrangement under which she is off the premises and unreachable, except her half-day on Sunday and one evening in the month, and even those are granted rather than owed. Her working day is bounded at one end by the hour she must rise, and at the other by the hour the household stops needing anything, and both of those hours are set by other people. Which brings us to the thing that matters most about this cold room under the roof. The housemaid must be up at 5:30. Not because 5:30 is a convenient hour, but because the range must be raked out and lit before there can be hot water, and there must be hot water before anyone above stairs can wash, and the fires must be laid and lit before anyone above stairs can come down into a warm room. Every comfortable morning in this house is built backwards from her rising. She has no clock. There is no clock in this room, and a watch is a serious purchase on £14 a year. She wakes by habit, by the church clock 3 streets away, and by the cook, who wakes by habit too, and has been doing it since she was 13. She takes off her boots, sets them where she can find them in the dark, folds her dress over the chair, because it must be fit to put on again in 5 hours, and gets into a flock mattress that has been shaped by her own body over 11 months. The candle goes out, the room becomes very dark and stays cold, and the two of them lie in it, 4 floors above the drawing room, above the ceiling roses and the good carpet and the gas. You have never spent a full minute in that room. Once a year, at the spring cleaning, you look in from the doorway while the mattresses are out and the windows open, and you note whether the whitewash needs doing, and you go down again. You pay for the room, you bought the bedstead, you know precisely what the flock in that mattress cost, because you signed for it. And still it is not a room you go into, and if you did go into it and sit down on the chair with the broken cane, the woman who sleeps there would stand up and wait for you to leave. Neither of you has ever discussed this. It does not require discussion. The stairs themselves explain it, narrowing as they rise, losing their carpet, losing their light, until they arrive at a door that opens inward on a room the household depends upon absolutely and looks at once a year. The stairs bring you down 2 flights to your own floor, and the difference is immediate. There is carpet under your feet again. The landing gas is turned low, but it is burning, which is more than can be said for anything above the 3rd story, and the air here is merely cold rather than actively unkind. Your bedroom is at the front of the house, over the drawing room, and the grate is laid with paper, wood, and a small measure of coal, ready for morning. It has not been lit. You considered it at dinner and decided against it, as you decide against it most nights between October and April, on the reasoning that a bedroom fire costs money and burns unattended, and nobody in this house is ill. The thermometer on the chest of drawers, if you cared to hold the candle to it, would show something in the middle 40s. You do not hold the candle to it. You already know. The housemaid came in at 10 o'clock, before she went up, and stood behind you, and unfastened the back of your bodice. This is not a courtesy. It is a structural necessity of the way the dress is built. 19 hooks run up the spine from waist to collar, set close, and no arrangement of shoulder and elbow will get a woman to the middle 6 of them. She worked from the bottom up, with her thumbnail under each hook, said good night, took the dress over her arm to hang and brush, and went. What remains is the part you can do alone, and it takes a quarter of an hour. The order is the order of the morning. Run backwards. The skirt first, unhooked at the waistband, and stepped out of, and lifted onto the chair by its band, so the pleats at the back keep their shape. The pad that holds those pleats out behind, which is a crescent of stiffened muslin, stuffed with horsehair and tied at the front with tapes, comes next. And it goes on the chair too, looking like nothing at all once it is off. Then the petticoats, 2 of them tonight, the top one flounced, the under one plain, then the stockings, rolled down and off, and the garters, then the corset, which is the only object in the room that is genuinely difficult. It laces at the back and fastens at the front with a steel busk, and the sequence for getting out of it is to slacken the lace, with one hand reaching behind you, blindly, until you have loosened enough slack to unhook the busk, then open the busk stud by stud from the bottom, and then lift the whole thing off, over the loosened lace, without pulling that lace all the way out. If you pull it out, you must thread it again in the morning, and threading a corset lace through 24 eyelets by candlelight, while a governess waits downstairs, is a small misery you would rather not arrange for yourself. So you are careful. The corset comes off and hangs over the end of the bedstead, keeping its shape, holding the impression of the day. Underneath all of it, there has been, since 7:30 this morning, a chemise and a pair of drawers, plain cotton, and these you keep on. You do not undress to the skin at night in a room at 45 degrees. You put the nightgown on over the chemise and let the chemise stay where it is, and every advice book of the period that mentions the subject at all quietly assumes that this is what women do. The nightgown itself is worth looking at properly, because it is a garment we have almost entirely lost the shape of. It is not a slip, and it is not a nightdress in any modern sense. It is a full-length gown, ankle-length or longer, high at the throat, with long sleeves gathered into a cuff, and a yoke across the chest, into which the fullness of the body is gathered. This one is white cotton, a plain, firm calico, with 3 rows of tucks above the hem and a narrow frill at the neck and wrists, and the hem is deep enough to be let down if the gown shrinks. There are 5½ yards of cloth in it. Calico of this weight runs about 5 pence a yard, so the material cost something under 2 shillings and 4 pence, and the making of it was an evening's work, with the machine, and another evening for the tucks and the buttonholes. Bought ready-made from a draper, it would be 3 shillings and 6 pence to 5 shillings, depending on the frill. You own 6. 2 are flannel, kept for the coldest weeks and for illness, and flannel is a different proposition altogether, warmer by a wide margin, heavier on the shoulders, and dearer at 10 pence or a shilling the yard. The cook owns 2, both flannelette. The children have 4 apiece, because children's laundry cannot be economized on. Over the nightgown goes the shawl that lives folded at the foot of the bed, a square of grey knitted wool, and on your feet a pair of bed socks. There is nothing decorative about either. The nightcap, which is the object modern audiences find most comic, is entirely functional, and you would not sleep without it. It is a bag of soft cotton, gathered on a drawstring, with a frill at the front and tapes that tie under the chin. Its purpose is to keep your plaited hair from working loose and tangling against the pillow, and to keep the top of your head warm in a room where your breath is very nearly visible. Heat leaves a body from the scalp faster than from almost anywhere else. Every generation before central heating understood this without needing to be told. The hair is the longest part of the whole business. Sit down at the dressing table and take out the pins. There are a great many pins. A woman of your class in this decade wears her hair drawn back, up, and arranged at the back of the head in a mass that is partly her own hair and partly not. The pins are plain wire, blackened, bent into a long, narrow U, and they come out one at a time and go into the china tray with a small sound each. 22 of them tonight. Then the 2 combs. Then the coil at the back comes down, and then you lift away the switch of false hair, a foot-long plait of hair matched to your own color, bought from a hairdresser's for something between 7 and 12 shillings, which has been supplying the volume that fashion requires, and that your own head, after 3 children, does not supply on its own. Nobody considers this deceitful. Every woman of your acquaintance owns one, and the shops advertise them openly in the newspapers alongside soap and umbrellas. It goes in its box in the drawer, wrapped in a cloth. Then the brush. 100 strokes is what the manuals prescribe, and if 100 sounds arbitrary, remember that you wash this hair perhaps once in 5 or 6 weeks, because washing long hair in a house with no upstairs hot water means a jug relay, an hour's drying by the fire, and a headache if the drying is not thorough. What you do instead, nightly, is brush. Brushing distributes the oil, lifts the dust of a London day out of the length of it, and does the work that shampooing would otherwise do. A bristle brush and a fine comb, and afterwards you clean the brush itself with a comb and wipe it, which is its own small task. Then the hair is divided and plaited into one loose plait so it cannot knot, and tied at the end with a tape, and the cap goes over it. Washing takes 4 minutes. The jug on the washstand holds about half a gallon, and it was filled this afternoon and has been standing in a room at 45 degrees since, so the water is at the temperature of the room, which is to say, cold enough to make you inhale sharply. You pour a little into the basin. Face, throat, hands, arms to the elbow, with a flannel and a piece of soap kept in a covered dish. Teeth, cleaned with a brush, and a pinch of powder from a small pot, chalk and orris root, and a little soap, and the mouth rinsed and spat into the basin. Then the used water goes into the slop pail beneath the washstand, and the pail stands there with its lid on until morning, when somebody carries it down. Which is the part of this to hold on to? Every pint of water in this bedroom arrived here in somebody's hands. There is one tap in the house, and it is in the scullery, in the basement. The housemaid fills a pair of tin cans there, and each holds 3 gallons, and 3 gallons of water weighs 30 pounds before you count the can. She carries them up the back stairs. From the scullery to your washstand is 52 steps. She does that circuit for your room and your husband's dressing room and the nursery, morning and evening, and she carries the dirty water back down the same stairs afterwards, and in a house with a hip bath in use, she does it many more times than that. When we say that a middle-class Victorian bedroom had hot water waiting in the morning, that is the whole mechanism. That is all it ever was. The last thing is the laundry, and the laundry is where the household's real feeling about cleanliness can be measured, because it is measured in money. Your nightgowns are changed weekly, the children's twice a week. Sheets, and this is the figure that surprises people, are changed once a fortnight in this house, which is on the generous side of ordinary. Plenty of respectable households ran to 3 weeks or a month and turned the undersheet to the top in between. Bolster cases and pillow slips weekly, because they take the hair oil. Counterpanes and blankets are not washed at all in the usual course of things, but aired, beaten, and put through a proper cleaning once a year at the spring cleaning. The washing goes out. You send it to a laundress 2 streets over on a Monday, and it comes back on a Thursday, damp dried and ironed, and she charges by the dozen articles with the larger pieces counted separately, and the bill for a household of this size runs between £8 and £12 a year. That is a real sum. It is most of the housemaid's wages. It is why a sheet is changed on the 14th day rather than the 7th, and why 6 nightgowns is the right number to own rather than 3 or 12, and why the arithmetic of how often a bed is made fresh was never really a question of taste at all. So consider the bed. Not the idea of it, the object, the thing standing against the inner wall of your bedroom with its curtains half drawn, because it is not one item at all, it is an assembly, 8 or 9 separate purchases, made at different times, stacked in a particular order, and the order matters, and every layer in it was chosen with a price in mind. Begin at the floor and work upward. The frame is iron, with brass mounts at the corners of the head and a brass rail along the top, and it is what a furniture warehouse would call a half-tester. That means the canopy covers only the head of the bed rather than the whole of it, a shallow roof of the same fabric as the curtains, which fall on either side of the pillows and can be drawn forward if you want them, 4 feet 6 inches wide. Your parents slept in a wooden 4-poster with curtains all the way round and a valance to the floor, and that bed is now in a spare room at your mother's house and is thought a little heavy, a little old-fashioned, a little too enclosed for modern opinion about air. Between the 2 side rails there is a bottom, and the bottom is either laths or sacking. Yours is sacking, a stout woven hemp bed bottom laced through brass eyelets to the frame with cord, which you can tighten when it slackens, and which you have tightened twice since the bed came into the house. It gives when you sit on it, and it makes a particular small creak of rope and iron, and you know that creak better than you know almost any other sound in your life. The alternative, newer and rather admired, is a lattice of flat iron laths on spiral springs. The people who have it say it is more comfortable. The people who don't say it will sag in a decade and can't be repaired with a length of cord and 10 minutes. On top of the bottom goes the palliasse, and the palliasse is straw, a long flat case of striped ticking, stuffed hard with wheat straw or with chaff, sewn shut, and it costs 3 or 4 shillings to have made, and is meant to be emptied and refilled once a year, because straw breaks down into dust and stops springing back. New in September, it smells faintly of harvest, and it crackles when you lie down, and by the following August, it is flat and silent and a little sour, and that is when it goes on the fire. Its whole purpose is to be the sacrificial layer. It takes the wear from the frame beneath and the damp from the floor, and it keeps the expensive things above it out of contact with hemp cord and iron. Above the palliasse, in your bed, is a horsehair mattress, and this is the item in the room that a knowledgeable visitor would notice first, if visitors ever came into a bedroom, which they don't. Curled horsehair, boiled and teased and stitched into a case of good ticking, tufted through at intervals with linen tufts to hold the filling in place, and it cost £3 15 shillings, which is a startling figure for something nobody will ever see. Horsehair is bought because it is resilient. It springs back. It does not compact into ridges the way cheaper fillings do. It does not hold damp, and the doctors and the sanitary writers approve of it in the strongest terms available to men writing about furniture. A hard mattress, they say, is a healthy mattress. Most beds in this country do not have horsehair. Most beds have flock, and flock deserves a moment because the word does a great deal of hiding. Flock is shredded cloth, wool rags, the waste from woolen mills, old blankets, torn coats, whatever came through the rag trade, pulled apart by machine and stuffed into a tick. A double flock mattress can be had for something between 15 shillings and £1.50, which is why it is in the servants' beds upstairs and in most of the beds in most of the streets around you. It is not a bad thing to sleep on when it is new. What it does is compact. Body weight drives the flock into lumps and hollows, and unless somebody takes the mattress apart and does something about it, the hollows become permanent, and you begin to sleep in a shape rather than on a surface. Then, on top of the horsehair, the feather bed. This is the layer people picture when they picture a Victorian bed, and it is also the layer that the entire reforming medical opinion of the century was arguing against. A feather bed is a deep sack of ticking, closely woven so the quills can't work through, filled with goose feathers, perhaps 40 or 50 pounds of them by weight. Feathers cost roughly a shilling to 18 pence a pound for the ordinary sorts, more for down, so the filling alone comes to 4 or 5 pounds sterling before the tick and the making. It is the single most expensive object you sleep on, and it is the one your husband's mother gave you. What it does is enclose you. You do not lie on a feather bed, you lie in it, and the feathers rise on either side and hold the warmth against you. And in a bedroom at 45 degrees in November, that is not a small thing. What the doctors object to is exactly that. Too soft, they say, for a growing spine. Too warm, and warmth encourages relaxation of the constitution. And, more seriously, a feather bed cannot be scalded, cannot be beaten thoroughly, absorbs everything and gives nothing back, and can be perhaps a decade old before anyone thinks to question what is inside it. The manuals are firm that children should never have feather beds and should sleep on hair or on good flock, hard and thin and cool, and in this house that rule is actually followed upstairs, which means the softest bed in the building belongs to the 2 adults who need it least, and the hardest belongs to the 3 people the advice literature was worrying about. Now the bedding, which goes on in a fixed order that every woman in the house could recite. An underblanket first, laid over the feather bed to take the wear and the damp. Then the undersheet, linen, drawn tight and tucked deep under the mattress on all 4 sides. Then the upper sheet, then blankets, 3 of them at this time of year, thick Whitney wool, and their edges are bound so they don't fray under the tuck. Then the counterpane, which is white cotton woven in a raised honeycomb pattern, and which is not there for warmth. It is there because a made bed must look like something. It is the visible face of all these layers, the one thing that says the bed has been dealt with properly, and it is squared to the frame with the same care you would give a tablecloth. At the head, laid across the full width, the bolster, a long firm cylinder of feathers in its own case. 2 pillows sit on top of that. Somewhere in the linen cupboard there is an eiderdown, light and slippery and enormously warm, which comes out when somebody is ill and otherwise stays wrapped in a sheet on the top shelf, because it is understood to be a luxury, and luxuries are rationed even from oneself. The whole of it, blankets and counterpane and sheets together, weighs something in the region of 15 or 20 pounds, and that weight is not incidental. Warmth in a cold room comes from mass. You will lie under a load that pins the arms and makes turning over a decision rather than a reflex, and in the morning your shoulders will know it, and you will not think of it as anything other than the way a bed is. Add the assembly up, honestly. Bedstead, 2 pounds and a little, palliasse, a few shillings, horsehair mattress, 3 pounds 15, feather bed and bolster, 5 pounds, blankets and sheets, and counterpane and pillows, another 3 or 4, across the years they were bought, 12 to 15 pounds standing against your bedroom wall. Your housemaid is paid 16 pounds a year in cash. You sleep, every night, on very nearly her whole year. 2 things still have to happen before you can get into it. The first is warmth. At about 10:30, the housemaid comes up with the warming pan, or in this house, more often now, with the stone bottle. The warming pan is the older article, a shallow covered copper dish on a long wooden handle, filled with embers from the kitchen range, and you slide it between the sheets and you keep it moving, always moving, in slow sweeps from the foot upward, because a warming pan held still for the length of a breath will scorch linen and leave a brown shadow of itself that no laundress in London can take out. Everybody who has ever used one has done this at least once. The newer thing is a salt-glazed earthenware bottle, flat on one side, with a screw stopper, filled from the kettle and wrapped in a piece of flannel, and it goes at the foot of the bed and stays there and cannot burn anything and will still be faintly warm at 4 in the morning. It is one of the genuine mercies of the age, and nobody has ever written a word of praise about it. The second is that all of this must come apart again in 9 hours. Every morning, every bed in the house is stripped to the mattress. Every mattress is turned, and turning does not mean flipping it once. It means alternating over one day and end for end the next, so that the filling wears evenly and no permanent hollow forms where a hip goes. A feather bed has to be shaken, gripped at the corners and thrown up and caught until the feathers redistribute and the flat places fill, and the manuals say plainly that this is work for 2 servants together, because one person cannot shake a 50-pound sack of feathers properly, and one person will therefore do it badly, and the bed will lump. Then the whole business is left open to a cold window for an hour before it is made up again. And once a year, at spring cleaning, the flock mattresses in the attic and the nursery are unpicked along one seam and emptied onto a sheet on the floor, and the flock is pulled apart by hand, lump by lump, teased back into something loose, while the tick is washed and dried, and then it all goes back in, and the seam is sewn shut. A mattress maker will do it for a few shillings, and collect and return. In most houses, nobody pays the few shillings. The seams matter for a second reason, and it is the reason the candle is still lit. Every stitched line in that mattress, every joint in that bedstead, every place where 2 pieces of wood meet at a right angle, or where a piece of piping is sewn over a fold of ticking, is a place where something can live. You know this. Your cook knows it, your housemaid knows it, your mother taught it to you the way she taught you to test a hem, and it is the one part of the household's nightly business that nobody will mention aloud in a drawing room for as long as the century lasts. So before you get into the bed, you inspect it. The candle comes with you, held low and a little away from the fabric, because you have been warned about that your whole life, and you have seen what a nightgown sleeve can do near a flame. You tilt the shade so the light falls sideways rather than straight down, because sideways light throws shadows into a crack, and straight light flattens everything into nothing. Then you go round the bed, the way you go round anything in this house, in an order, the same order each time, because an order is what stops you forgetting the corner behind the door, behind the headboard first, where the frame stands a finger's width from the wall and where the plaster is coldest. Then along the top rail, where the head end joins the side rails, and into that join with a hairpin, feeling for anything that is not paint. Then down the inside of each side rail, and under the ledge where the laths or the sacking are fixed, which is the place you actually expect to find something, and which is therefore the place you look at twice. Then the mattress itself, lifted at one corner and folded back a hand's width, and the candle brought along the piping seam, and along the tuft buttons, and into the fold where the ticking has been turned over and stitched. Then the bolster, shaken and looked into, rather than merely looked at. Then the same for the small crevice where the valance is tacked to the frame. The whole business takes 4 or 5 minutes, and you have done it so many hundreds of times that your hands do most of it while your mind is somewhere else entirely, on the coal, on tomorrow's fishmonger, on the child upstairs with a cough. What you are looking for is the bedbug, chiefly, and the flea, and in the flock mattresses the moth, whose grubs get into wool and horsehair and quietly reduce a good stuffing to dust over a few summers. These are not exotic afflictions, and they are not confined to the poor, whatever the pamphlets say. They are in London houses of every size and every rent. They come in on a trunk, in a second-hand chair, in a parcel from a shop, in the seam of a servant's box, through the party wall from the house next door, which is a brick's thickness away and full of people whose habits you cannot govern. A well-run house does not defeat them. A well-run house fights a holding action indefinitely and counts each clear week as a win, and nobody ever declares victory because there is no such thing. The manuals are unembarrassed about it, which is a relief, because nobody else is. They give the remedies plainly, in the same practical tone they use for cleaning a saucepan. Turpentine is the standard. You get a feather or a small brush kept only for this, and you paint turpentine into every joint and crack of the bedstead, working it into the mortices and along the lath ledges until the wood is dark with it, and you leave the room open afterward because the smell is considerable and it lingers in the hangings for a day. Camphor goes in the mattress folds and in the linen press, in little muslin bags or as loose lumps, and is chiefly for the moth. Paraffin does the same work as turpentine and is cheaper, at something under £1 a gallon by the late 70s, and is used freely in kitchens and attics, and rather more cautiously in a good bedroom, because of what it does to a polished finish, and because of the obvious hazard of paraffin and a candle in the same small room. Then there is boiling water, which is the honest one, the one that actually works, and the one that requires a house, with a scullery copper and a servant to carry it. At spring cleaning, the bedsteads come apart entirely, joint by joint, out on the landing or in the yard, and a kettle of water straight off the range is poured through every mortise and along every rail until the metal or the wood is too hot to hold, and the pieces are dried and wiped over with paraffin or turpentine and put back together. Whitewash goes on the attic walls and the underside of the sloping ceiling once a year, cheap lime wash brushed straight onto plaster, which is a disinfectant and a filler of cracks and a brightener of a dim room all at once, and which is why servants' rooms in careful houses are white and slightly powdery to the touch. The scheduling of all this falls to you. Turpentine on the joints of the nursery beds every few weeks in warm weather, and every month or two in cold, a full taking apart in spring, and, in a house with any anxiety about it, again in September. Camphor renewed when it has evaporated to nothing, which happens faster than anyone expects. And the nightly candle round, which is yours in your own room, and the housemaid's in the rooms she is responsible for, and which is checked by you at intervals without announcement. Now, this is the part of the story where a piece of furniture changes shape because of a bug. Go back 40 years and the respectable bed in a house like this one is wood, a 4-poster or a half-tester in mahogany, with turned posts and carved rails and a great deal of joinery, hung about with curtains and a valance and a canopy lining, all of it in wool damask or moreen that cannot be washed because washing would ruin it. It is a handsome object, and it is also, from a housekeeping point of view, a catastrophe. Every carved flourish is a shelter. Every mortise and tenon joint is a crack that no amount of turpentine reaches to the bottom of. Every yard of unwashable hanging holds dust and moth and everything else, and the whole thing is too heavy to take apart casually and too expensive to throw away. The iron bedstead has almost none of these problems. It is made of drawn tube and rod, hollow and smooth, bolted at 4 points instead of jointed at 20. There is nothing carved on it to hide in. You can pour a kettle over the entire frame without harming it, wipe it with a cloth, and see at a glance whether anything is in the joins, because there are hardly any joins to see into. And by the middle of the century, Birmingham was turning these out by the 100,000 in wire drawing and japanning works that could produce a plain single bedstead to sell for something in the region of 15 or 18 shillings, with a good brass-topped double running from perhaps £2.10 upward. A wooden bed of the old sort cost several times that and took a joiner weeks. What happened next is one of the more interesting reversals in domestic taste. Hospitals took iron bedsteads first, and barracks, and workhouse infirmaries, for exactly the reasons above. They could be scalded, they could be counted, they could be replaced. Then the sanitary writers began to recommend them for private houses on the same grounds, and then the private houses did it, and within a generation, the iron bedstead was not a piece of institutional equipment, but a mark of a well-kept modern bedroom, and the heavy hangings came down off the beds that remained, and airiness became a virtue rather than a draught. Fashion, for once, travelled upward from the hospital ward to the family bedroom, and it travelled because of hygiene, and the hygiene was largely about what could and could not be reached with boiling water. Which brings us to the part that is harder to be comfortable about. Everything you have just done tonight, you were able to do because of money. You inspected a bedstead you own outright, and could have taken apart on a Saturday if you wanted to. If the flock in a mattress were past saving, you could buy another mattress, unhappily, at a cost you could absorb. You have a copper in the scullery, a range that is hot from 6 in the morning until 10 at night, and a servant whose job includes carrying boiling water up 3 flights of stairs. You have whitewash and turpentine in the store cupboard, and a shilling for more. In a furnished lodging in the next street, a family renting 1 room by the week owns none of the furniture. The bedstead belongs to the landlord and cannot be taken to pieces without permission, and there is no permission. There is no copper and no range, only a small grate and a kettle, and the water comes from a shared tap in a yard. The walls are shared with 3 other families whose rooms nobody inspects. Anything cleared out of that room in April will be back by June from next door, through the plaster, and everyone concerned understands this perfectly well. And yet the sanitary reports of the period, and a good many of the tracts, will describe the presence of vermin in such a room as a matter of character, slovenly, indifferent, wanting in self-respect. The same writers who correctly identify a smooth iron frame and a kettle of boiling water as the whole secret of the thing will then treat the absence of a kettle, a copper, a scullery, a spare mattress, and a wall of one's own as a moral failing. It is not. The difference between your bed and that bed is not diligence, and it is not standards. It is water you can boil in quantity, a room whose air you control, and enough money to throw a mattress away. The country cottage, incidentally, has one real advantage here, which is that a straw or chaff mattress costs almost nothing. So when it becomes intolerable, it goes on the fire, and a new tick is filled from the barn at harvest. Poverty occasionally arrives at a solution that money would never think of. The candle goes down on the table by the bed. The room smells of camphor and faintly of turpentine from the nursery landing, and the smell will still be there in the morning, thinner, mixed with coal smoke. Nothing tonight. which means nothing about next week, when you will go round the frame again, in the same order, behind the headboard first, and hope for nothing again. 11 o'clock, or near enough. The candle is still burning, which means the room has one small source of heat in it, and you are about to blow that out too. Here is the part that no painting of a Victorian bedroom has ever managed to convey, because it is not visible. The room is cold, not picturesquely cold, not crisp. There has been no fire in this grate since the last week of October, and the November air in here has settled at something like 45 degrees, perhaps a little below it against the outside wall. You have been undressing in it for 20 minutes, and your hands have gone stupid at the fingertips. The washstand jug, if you touched it now, would be colder than the water in it was warm when it came up, and the bed is colder than the room. This is the thing nobody warns you about until you have done it once. Linen sheets in an unheated bedroom in winter do not simply feel cool, they feel actively wet, and the sensation of getting into them is the sensation of being handled by something. Cotton is a little kinder. Linen is what respectable households use because it launders harder, lasts longer, and looks better on the bed, and linen in a cold room has a quality of clamminess that has nothing to do with actual damp. It draws heat off you at a rate you can feel in the small of your back. So you do not simply get in. There is a method, and you learned it as a child from a nursemaid who learned it from somebody else. The stone bottle went in half an hour ago, filled at the kitchen range from the last of the hot water, and screwed shut, and wrapped in a piece of old flannel, because bare stoneware against a bare foot will scald. It has been sitting down at the bottom under the blankets on your side, and it has done its work in a radius of about 1.5 feet. Everything outside that radius is still as it was. You keep the shawl on, not a decorative shawl, a thick knitted wool square that lives folded at the foot of the bed all winter and goes over your shoulders the moment the last petticoat is off, and stays there while you get in, and often stays there all night. The nightcap is already tied, the bed socks are on. You sit on the edge, swing your feet under, find the wrapped bottle with your heels first, because that is where the warmth is worth having, and then you lie down flat and pull the whole weight of the bedclothes up under your chin in one movement, quickly, so as not to open a channel for the cold air to come in beside you. Then you hold still for 2 or 3 minutes and let your own body heat the sheet. That is all warmth in a bed is, in this house, in this year. It is not supplied, it is manufactured, by you, out of your own body, and the layers of wool and feather above you exist only to stop it escaping. Once the linen has stopped taking heat off you and started giving it back, the bed becomes one of the pleasantest places in the entire building, and you understand exactly why people of this era write about their beds the way they do. Before that, though, one more piece of the arrangement, and it deserves saying plainly, because the polite silence around it has done a great deal to make the past look more comfortable than it was. There is no bathroom on this floor. There is a water closet on the half landing between the ground floor and the first, put in 11 years ago when the drains were relaid, and going down to it means 2 flights of unlit stairs in the cold, with a candle in one hand. So under the bed, on a small shelf, built into the frame, or simply on the floorboards where your hand can find it, there is a china chamber pot with a lid, part of the same patterned set as the jug and basin on the washstand. Behind the screen in the corner, there is a close stool, a commode, a chair with a hinged seat and a china pan inside it, and a flannel-lined lid to keep the cold off. That is the whole system. Every bedroom in the house has some version of it. The nursery has two. The attic has one, shared between the cook and the housemaid. And all of it is emptied by hand, by one woman, in the hour before anyone respectable is awake. Slop pail, back stairs, and a set of manners so firmly established that in a lifetime of living in this house, you will never once see it happen. We will come to her hour, for now it is enough to notice that the machinery of an upstairs night runs on somebody carrying it downstairs in the dark, and that the elegance of the arrangement consists entirely in its invisibility. Now, the window. This is where you have to make a decision that a great many households in this decade argue about at some length, and where two entirely opposed medical authorities are both shouting at you from the bookshelf. The older instinct, the one your grandmother held and one or two of your aunts still hold, is that night air is dangerous, not metaphorically, actively harmful, damp, heavy, carrying the exhalations of the ground and the drains and whatever is rotting in the mews, and the correct response to it is to shut it out, seal the window, close the shutters, draw the bed curtains, and sleep inside a warm enclosed pocket of your own breathing. That is what a four-poster with full curtains is for. It is not decoration. It is a room within a room, built to exclude drafts and to exclude night air, and for 2 centuries people slept in them with the curtains pulled and considered it the healthiest thing they could do. Against that, from about the middle of the century onward, comes the sanitary movement, and it comes hard. Florence Nightingale, in her Notes on Nursing, published when you were a girl, states it about as bluntly as it can be stated. The first requirement is to keep the air the sleeper breathes as pure as the air outside, without chilling them. She is scathing about the alternative. She writes about walking into bedrooms in the morning where the air is foul enough to be felt at the door, about people who shut every crack and then wonder why they wake heavy-headed, about the peculiar English habit of treating the bedroom as a box to be closed rather than a room to be aired. Her argument is not about germs, because that is not yet the settled framework. It is about vitiated air, breathed and rebreathed, and about the observable fact that people confined in still air do worse than people in moving air. The engineers and the barracks inspectors and the lodging house officials put numbers on the same idea. The figure that circulates through the reports is a minimum of somewhere between 300 and 500 cubic feet of air for each sleeper, and a supply of fresh air constantly renewing it, and the common lodging houses are inspected against something like the lower end of that. Your own bedroom, at about 15 feet by 13, with a ceiling near 10, holds nearly 2,000 cubic feet for 2 people, which by those standards is luxurious, and by Nightingale's standards is worth nothing at all if you seal it up. What ordinary households actually do is negotiate. Nobody in a house with no heating upstairs is going to throw a sash wide open in November because a book told them to. So the window goes up an inch, sometimes 2 in milder weather, sometimes not at all when there is frost on the inside of the glass. And because an inch of open sash at head height produces a draft that will run directly across the pillow, you deal with the draft rather than closing the window. A rolled towel or a length of old blanket goes along the sill inside the frame to break the flow. Some households fit a board across the bottom of the opening so the air comes in upward through the gap between the 2 sashes and mixes with the room air before it reaches anybody. Advice writers describe that arrangement approvingly, and it works. You open it an inch, you put the rolled cloth along the sill. The shutters stay closed, because the shutters are for warmth, and for darkness, and they do not seal tightly enough to stop the air from the inch above them. The bed curtains you leave open. Your mother would have drawn them. The half-tester above you has hangings at the head and down the sides, and you can pull them across if you want. And there are nights in January when you do, because the difference in warmth is real. But the tone of every sanitary tract of the last 20 years has been so consistently against sleeping shut inside fabric that you have half absorbed it without deciding to, and the curtains mostly hang where they are and do nothing but keep the draft off the top of your head, which, in fairness, was one of their original purposes and remains the honest one. The candle goes out, 2 fingers, wetted, on the wick, because a puff of breath sends the smoke and the smell across the pillow. Now the house begins to be audible, which it never is by day. Down in the street a cab goes past, the hooves loud and then not, the wheels running on the roadway with that particular grinding note that iron rims make on granite sets. And after it a longer stretch of nothing, a dog somewhere behind the terrace, 2 streets off, answering another dog, the church clock, which you cannot hear at all during daylight and can hear perfectly now, striking 11, and then a quarter, and then the half, and you will hear every quarter it strikes until you stop noticing. And the house itself, a brick terrace with the fires out, cools unevenly, all night, and it complains about it. A floorboard on the landing lets go with a crack like a knuckle. The banister rail somewhere below does the same thing 20 minutes later. Something in the chimney breast behind the headboard settles with a small dry tick, and then again, at intervals, at no rhythm you can predict. The sashes shift in their frames when the wind gets round the corner of the street. Once, from the 3rd floor, the sound of a child turning over and the cot creaking, and you listen for 4 or 5 seconds to see whether it will become anything, and it does not. The inch of open window brings in air that is fresh and about 38 degrees, and the warmth under the blankets has arrived at last, and your feet are against the flannel-wrapped stone, and for a while the arrangement holds. Sometime after 1 o'clock, you are awake. Nothing has woken you, no cry from upstairs, no door, no wind against the sash. You simply surface, the way you surface most nights, out of the first solid stretch of sleep, into a room that has gone completely black and completely still, and you lie there with your eyes open and no particular sense of alarm about it. This is worth understanding properly, because the modern instinct is to treat it as a problem. You do not. Waking in the middle of the night is, for you, an ordinary feature of a night, like the cold or the weight of the blankets. Your mother woke in the small hours. Your grandmother woke in the small hours and said so in letters without apologizing for it. There is no word in your vocabulary for what a later century will call insomnia and treat with medicine, and there is no expectation in your head that a night should be one unbroken peace. Your watch is on the table beside you, wound before you got in, lying face up in a small dish, so it will not slide. You could reach it. Reading it is another matter, because reading it requires a light, and a light requires a match, and the match will flare and hurt your eyes and cost you the dark adapted vision it has taken you 2 hours to acquire. So you do not. You wait for the church clock instead, which is the free instrument, and you lie still and count the house. The house has changed since 11. It has finished cooling and gone quiet in a different register, and what you can hear now is smaller and more distant. Someone upstairs turning over, the faint suck and release of the inch of open window when a draft comes round the terrace. Nothing from the attic at all, which is what you want to hear from the attic. Then, from 3 streets off, thinned by brick and distance, the clock gives you a quarter. One stroke. It is a quarter past something, and you have to work out which something from how long you think you slept, and you decide you are probably at a 1:15, and you are probably right. Here is where historians have spent a great deal of effort, and it is worth slowing down for. There is a substantial body of evidence that for most of European history, ordinary people did not sleep the way a 20th century office worker sleeps. They slept in 2 portions, a first sleep, beginning not long after dark, a waking interval of perhaps an hour, sometimes more, somewhere in the middle of the night. Then a second sleep, running through to dawn. The evidence for this is not a single document, but an accumulation of them, and the accumulation is what makes it convincing. Diaries refer to the interval without explaining it, which is the strongest kind of evidence, because people do not explain what everyone already knows. Court depositions place events at the time of first sleep, or after first sleep, as though that were a perfectly ordinary way of fixing an hour, the way you might say, mid-afternoon. Medical writers of the 16th and 17th centuries discuss which posture belongs to the first sleep and which to the second. There are printed devotional books with prayers composed specifically for use during the watch between sleeps, on the assumption that a reader would be lying awake and looking for something to do with the time. What people did in that interval, so far as the record shows, was undramatic. They lay still and thought. They prayed. They talked quietly to whoever was in the bed with them, which for most of the population was somebody, and there is an argument that this interval was one of the few genuinely private conversational hours in a crowded life. Some got up and tended a fire, or a fermenting brew, or an animal. Some worked, if the work could be done by touch or by the light of a very small flame. The honest limits of the evidence need stating, because this idea has become popular enough to be repeated badly. Most of the strong documentation is earlier than your century. By 1878, in a London house lit by gas on the ground floor, the pattern has been under pressure for 100 years, because artificial light pushes bedtime later and compresses the night at one end. Nobody can tell you with confidence whether you personally have a first sleep and a second sleep in the old formal sense, or whether you simply have a broken night in a cold room and a habit of not minding. What can be said is that the mind you bring to this waking is not a modern mind. You are not lying here calculating how many hours remain and how ruined tomorrow will be. You are lying here, awake, in the middle of a night, which is a place people have been for a very long time. The advice literature has opinions about all of it, and the opinions are specific. On which side to lie? The right, chiefly, on the grounds that lying on the left presses upon the heart and burdens it. This appears in book after book, with total confidence and no evidence whatever. Lying flat on the back is discouraged as producing heavy dreams and disordered breathing. Lying face down is discouraged more strongly and in a tone of mild moral disapproval, as though it were a failure of self-command. On the head, raised, but not much. A high stack of pillows is condemned as bending the neck and crowding the chest, and the recommended arrangement is a single pillow over the bolster, enough to keep the head a little above the level of the body, and no more. Children, the manuals insist, need less than that, and a hard, flat surface, and cool air, and no feathers. On what not to do while awake, reading in bed is discouraged with real force, partly on the argument that it strains the eyes and heats the brain when the brain ought to be cooling, and partly for the plainer reason that a candle at the level of a pillow, beside cotton hangings and a flannel nightgown, is a house fire waiting for a moment of inattention. Eating in bed is discouraged for the same category of reason as late suppers generally, which the household books treat as the origin of most disturbed nights. A heavy meal after 8 o'clock is held responsible for wakefulness, oppression, bad dreams, and a foul mouth in the morning. On what to do instead: warm milk. A cup of thin gruel, or arrowroot made with milk and taken slowly, which is the standing recommendation for a wakeful person of any age, and which several writers propose keeping ready on a hob for exactly this purpose. Weak tea is thought unhelpful, spirits are thought worse, and a small quantity of something warm and bland is thought to settle both stomach and mind. And on the morning, the same books that treat night waking as normal treat lying in bed after daylight as enervating, weakening, unwholesome, and slightly disgraceful. You may be awake for an hour at 2 in the morning without comment. You may not stay under the blankets at 7:30. You are awake, and there is one thing to attend to, so you attend to it. The cough from the floor above, the one you listened for at 11 and did not get, arrives now, 2 of them, then a small resettling, then nothing. You lie and give it a full minute. It does not come again. You get up anyway, because you will not sleep until you have looked, and this is how most of your nights go. Out of the bed, the cold is immediate and comprehensive. The shawl is at the foot where you left it, and it goes over your shoulders, and your feet find the strip of carpet, and then the bare board beyond it. On the washstand, there is a night light in a glass shade, one of the squat wax cylinders sold by the dozen in a tin box for a few pence, burning down slow and low with a flame no bigger than a pea, and it has been burning since 11 and will burn until morning. It gives no useful illumination. It gives you the position of the washstand and the shape of the door, which is what it is for. You take it out of its shade and use it to light a candle end in a flat-bottomed chamber candlestick, and now you have enough to climb by. The stairs in the dark are managed by memory. 6th tread creaks, take it near the wall. Turn at the half landing where the floor is uneven. Hand on the rail, candle held out and low, so the flame is not in front of your eyes, the light traveling with you up the wallpaper in a slow oval. On the 3rd floor, the nursery door stands ajar, as it was left. Inside, the smell of the guarded fire gone to ash, and the faint camphor from the room below, and 3 children breathing at 3 different speeds, and the nursemaid's bed against the far wall, her back to the room, motionless. The middle child has worked one arm free of the blankets, which is what the coughing was. You put it back. You feel the forehead with the back of your hand, and it is cool, and that is the end of the matter. You could wake the nursemaid. She is 4 feet from you. She is paid partly for this, and if you spoke her name, she would be up and apologizing inside 3 seconds. You do not, and the reason you do not is not entirely kindness. She will be up at 6. You will not be. Waking her costs the household something tomorrow, and it costs you nothing to do this yourself, and you have worked that out without ever putting it into words. Down again. Candle out at the bedroom door with a pinch of wetted fingers because a blown candle smokes. And back into a bed that has kept some of its warmth, but not all, and now the darkness of a shuttered room is fully available to you, and it is worth saying what that is actually like. It is not dimness. It is not the grey of a modern bedroom with a street lamp somewhere outside. Shutters closed, curtains drawn, the night light hidden behind you on the washstand. You can hold your hand in front of your face and know it is there only because you can feel the muscles holding it up. Nothing has an edge. The room exists as a set of remembered distances. Time behaves strangely in it. Without a visible clock, an hour has no shape at all. You lie there through what feels like a long while, long enough to have rearranged tomorrow's linen list twice, and the church clock gives you the half, and you realize the whole excursion upstairs and everything since has taken 15 minutes. There is a great deal of night left, and the second sleep, when it comes without your noticing. What wakes you the second time is not the clock. It is a cough, one floor above, coming down through the boards as a small dull knock rather than a sound. Two of them, then a pause, then a run of four. You are sitting up before you have decided anything. There is a version of listening that a woman who has run a nursery for 8 years does without effort, and it is not really listening to volume. It is listening for the shape of the thing. A dry cough at 2 in the morning is a nuisance. A cough with a hard ring at the top of it, a sort of brassy catch on the intake, is a different item altogether, and every mother in London in this decade knows the difference by ear because she has had to. This one is loose and low and coming from your middle child, and by the 4th or 5th run of it, you have already worked out that it is bronchial and not the other thing, which does not mean you go back to sleep. Shawl off the foot of the bed. Feet into the slippers, set exactly where they were set for this purpose. The night light lifted out of its saucer and shielded with your hand, because you know the landing well enough not to need more light than that, and because a full candle carried at speed goes out anyway. The stairs are colder than the room. The stair rail is cold in a way that makes you take it with your fingertips rather than your palm. The nursemaid is up before you get there. Of course she is. She sleeps 4 feet from the cot, and she has been awake since the second cough. And when you open the door, she is already on her knees at the grate with the tinder and a twist of paper, in her nightgown, with a shawl pinned across her chest, and she says, without turning round, that he has been at it since about 1:30, but only properly for the last few minutes. So the nursery fire is lit at 2 in the morning, and this is the whole point of the rule about bedroom fires. All winter, you have been careful with the upstairs grates. Coal in the bedrooms is for illness. This is illness, and so a good handful of coal goes on at an hour when nobody in the house is even nominally awake. And within 20 minutes, the room will be the warmest it has been since October. While the fire takes, you get the child upright. Sitting up eases a cough that lying flat does not, and so you build him a slope out of the bolster and both pillows and a folded blanket, and you put your own shawl round his shoulders, on top of his nightgown, and the flannel goes round his throat, a strip of red flannel about 4 inches wide, pinned at the side and worn until the cough is done with, sometimes for a week. The flannel is not doing anything a modern doctor would recognize. Everybody in the house believes in it completely. Then the tray. There is a tray, and it lives on the landing shelf outside the nursery door, and everything on it is there because somebody, at some point, needed it in the dark and could not find it. A tin candlestick with a stub in it and a box of matches. A small brass kettle with a long curved spout, which is the sick room kettle, and which exists so that steam can be directed at a particular spot in the room rather than dispersed generally. A spirit lamp to stand it on, so that you are not dependent on the fire being up. A jar of linseed meal, a muslin square, and a strip of old sheeting for spreading it on. A pot of camphorated ointment for rubbing on the chest, a bottle of Ipecacuanha wine for the cough, and the little glass measure that goes with it, marked in drachms, because the dose for a child of 6 is not the dose for a child of 11, and you are not going to guess at 2 in the morning. A tin of arrowroot, a jar of black currant jelly, which is for spooning into hot water and giving warm, and which the children like far more than anything else on the tray, which is much of its therapeutic value. The kettle goes on the spirit lamp with the spout turned towards the head of the cot, and you slide a screen round to keep the steam and the draught in the right relation to each other. The poultice takes about 4 minutes. Boiling water into a warmed basin, linseed meal, stirred in with a knife until it comes together as a smooth paste, spread about 1/4 of an inch thick on the muslin, edges turned in so nothing escapes, then tested against the inside of your own wrist, which is the test every household manual gives, and which is the correct test, because a poultice that scalds is a poultice that has done harm instead of good. Onto the chest, covered with the flannel, and it will hold its heat for the better part of an hour. None of this is improvised. This is a woman working from a text. The thing that is genuinely difficult to see from the far side of a century is how much medical authority sat in the hands of ordinary women in ordinary houses in the 1870s, and how explicitly the literature of the period put it there. Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management, which by this date has been through edition after edition and sits in most kitchens of your class, does not stop at menus and wages. It carries a substantial section on the management of the sick room, on the rearing of children, on what to do before the doctor arrives and what to do instead of him. Cassell's Household Guide does the same at greater length and with illustrations. Thomas Bull's book on the maternal management of children has been reprinted for 40 years. There are shelves of these, and they are not marginal publications. They are among the best-selling books in the country. They assume a reader who will be the first person to look at a sick child, and, most of the time, the only one. They tell her what a domestic medicine chest should hold, and the list is remarkably consistent from book to book. Castor oil, senna, ipecacuanha, sal volatile, mustard for plasters, camphor, linseed meal, arrowroot, sticking plaster, lint, a measure glass, a set of scales. They tell her how to make beef tea and how to make gruel, and why a sick person should be given small quantities often rather than large quantities rarely. They tell her to keep a record of the hours and the doses on a slate by the bed, because a doctor arriving at 8 in the morning will want to know what has happened since midnight, and no one remembers accurately at 8 in the morning. And they tell her, in language that is quite firm about it, when to stop managing and send. That is the decision you are actually holding, sitting on the edge of a cot at 2:20 with a poultice cooling under your hand, and it is not primarily a medical decision. It is a logistical and financial one, and it is worth being honest about how it works. Sending for a doctor at night is not a matter of speaking into anything. It is a matter of sending a person. That means going down 2 flights and waking the housemaid in the attic and telling her to dress and sending her out into a November street at 2:30 in the morning to walk the 400 or 500 yards to the practitioner's house on the corner of the next square and ring the night bell and wait on the step until a light shows. Then he dresses and he walks back with her, or takes a cab if the weather is bad, and the cab is on your bill. And the bill matters. A local general practitioner in London in this decade might charge something in the region of 3 shillings and 6pence to 5 shillings for an ordinary visit to a house of your standing in daylight. A visit between midnight and morning is charged at roughly double that, and half a guinea 10 shillings and sixpence, is a perfectly ordinary night fee. A physician proper, a consultant with letters after his name, thinks in guineas and does not come out at night for less. Set 10 shillings and sixpence against the fact that your housemaid is paid £16 a year, and that number is nearly a fortnight of her wages, arriving in one line item for one visit at one unsociable hour. In practice, you do not pay it out of a purse that night. You have an account with him, as most households of this kind do, and it is settled quarterly or annually, which softens the sting considerably and makes the calculation less brutal than it sounds. But it does not remove the calculation. It transfers it to a bill your husband will read in January, with the night visits itemized, and you will be the one who explains them. So the manuals give you a rule and you use it. Watch the breathing. Count it if you are not sure. If the cough loosens and he settles and takes warm liquid and goes back to sleep with the steam going, you sit with him and you send in the morning, and the morning visit costs half what the night visit does. If the breathing changes, if there is any pull at the base of the throat, if that hard, brassy catch comes into it, you send at once, and you do not think about January at all. By 3 o'clock the poultice has done what it does. The coughing has come down to a run every 10 minutes or so, then a longer gap. He has taken about 4 spoonfuls of hot water with jelly in it and gone heavy against the bolster. The nursemaid has gone back to her own bed, at your insistence, because one of you has to be functional at 6, and it is not going to be you. You do not go back down. There is a low chair by the nursery fire, the one you nursed all 3 of them in, and you pull it round so that you can see the cot and reach the kettle, and you sit in it with the shawl over your knees. The fire settles into that stage where it makes no flame and a great deal of heat. The kettle breathes on the spirit lamp. Somewhere below you, the entire house is asleep. The cook and the housemaid 2 floors up under the slates. Your husband on the floor beneath, the whole arrangement holding still, and you are the one point of consciousness in it, upright, warm at the front and cold at the back, awake on purpose. The candle on the mantel shelf has burned down to about an inch. Somewhere near 3:15, you get out of the chair, because sitting in one position that long has set your back into a shape you do not like, and you go out onto the landing with the shawl still round you to look at the street. The landing window has no shutters, only a blind, and you pull it up a few inches and put your face close to the glass. Cold comes off it like water off stone. Below you the square is empty, and the road is wet, and the gas lamp at the corner has been turned down to its economical night flame, a small blue and yellow tongue in a large glass box, throwing a circle of light about the width of a dining table and nothing beyond it. The house is asleep. The city is not. The first thing you see moving is the constable. He comes along the far pavement at the pace they are trained to walk, which is deliberately slow, somewhere near 2.5 miles an hour, so that a beat of a mile or so takes him the better part of half an hour, and he passes any given front door 2 or 3 times in a night. He is in a cape that shines with the damp. He has a lantern hooked at his belt, a bullseye with a thick round lens that throws a narrow beam, and every so often he stops, puts a hand out, and tries a door or a shop shutter without any real expectation. He tries the area gate of the house 4 doors along, finds it fastened, and goes on. You have never spoken to him. You know, from the housemaid, that he is the one who took his tea, standing in the kitchen passage on the night of the hard frost in February, which is the sort of arrangement you are not officially aware of. Behind him, further off, there is a sound you have learned to identify by texture rather than by looking. Iron tires on granite sets, a cart moving with a load on it, then a second, then, after a gap, a whole procession of them, the noise arriving before the shapes do. These are the market carts, and this is the hour they own. The gardens that feed London sit out past the built edge of it, in Middlesex and Surrey and the flat ground along the river, and the produce those gardens cut yesterday afternoon has to be standing in Covent Garden before the buyers come at dawn, which means the loading happens at 9 or 10 at night, and the horses start walking at midnight, and by 2 or 3 in the morning, the roads that run in toward the market are full of them, wagons stacked with baskets, the driver asleep on top of the load with the reins slack, the horse walking the route from memory because it has walked it 400 times. There is a whole class of Londoner whose working day begins in the dark and ends at 11 in the morning, and you have lived a quarter of a mile from their route for 11 years and have simply been asleep for all of it. Not all of it, tonight. The other traffic is less pleasant to think about and more necessary. The dust carts come round in these hours in some parishes, collecting the ash and cinders out of the bins in the areas, because a household that burns coal in 6 grates produces an extraordinary volume of ash, and somebody has to take it away. The dust contractors sift it and sell what can be sold, the fine ash to brickmakers, the unburned cinders back to the poor as second-hand fuel, the bones and rags and broken glass to whoever deals in bones and rags and broken glass. And in the districts that are still on cesspools rather than on the new drainage, the nightmen work these hours too, by law and by common decency, emptying by lamplight and carting out before the streets fill. Your own house is connected to the main sewer, which is a modern arrangement and a large part of what the rent is for. Somewhere within half a mile of where you are standing, at least a dozen men are baking bread. That is not a guess. The journeyman baker's shift in London starts at about 11 at night or 1 in the morning, in a bakehouse that is very often in the cellar below the shop, because the oven has to be lit and brought up to heat, and the dough has to prove and be knocked back and shaped and drawn before the shop opens and before anybody's breakfast. The government looked into the trade in the 1860s and did not much like what it found, and the hours have shortened a little since, and they are still hours that mean a man in that trade sees the sun the way you see the small of the night, occasionally, and by accident. When the housemaid takes in the loaves at 8, they will be 4 hours old and still faintly warm, and that warmth is the last of a fire that was lit before you woke the first time. Here is a thing worth slowing down for, because it explains why so many people are awake with such precision at hours when there is nothing to see the time by. In the mill towns of Lancashire and the West Riding, the factory whistle goes at 5:30, and the fine for being late at the gate can cost a spinner a quarter of a day's wage. So there is a trade, a real paid trade, with regular customers and a round, called knocking up. A man walks the terraces before dawn with a long bamboo pole and taps the upper windows of the houses that have paid him, and does not stop tapping until he sees a light or hears an answer. Some of them carry a short pea shooter for the higher windows and fire dried peas at the glass. The charge is a few pence a week per house, collected on a Saturday, and a good knocker-up has a book with the names in it and the different times each family wants, because the man on the early shift and the woman at the mill and the boy at the foundry are not all wanted at the same hour. Think about what has to be true for that to be a viable business. It has to be cheaper to pay a man to hit your window than to own a clock. And it was. A plain American clock at the end of the century might be had for a few shillings, but a reliable one that kept time through a week cost more, and a watch you could trust cost more again. Several weeks of an unskilled wage, which is precisely why the pawnbroker's Monday morning window was full of watches that had been pledged on Saturday night and would be redeemed on payday. On your own bedside table, there is a small gold watch that was your mother's. It cost, when it was bought, roughly what the housemaid earns in a year, and it exists to tell you that it is now 3:20, information which is of no practical use to you whatever, and which you have simply had, all your life, for nothing. While you are standing at this window, most of England is in bed. It is worth being honest about what those beds are. In the courts and lodgings a mile east of here, there are rooms of about 12 feet by 10, in which a family of 6 or 7 sleeps. The parents and the youngest in the bed, the older children on a flock mattress on the floor or across 2 chairs. Everything the household owns stacked round the walls, 1 grate, 1 window, and the same room used for cooking and washing and working in the daytime. Where there is a lodger taking a share of the rent, and there very often is, the bed itself can be run in shifts, so that a man on nights comes in at 6 in the morning and gets into the bedding the day worker has just left, and the mattress is not cold at any point in the 24 hours. That is not disorder. That is arithmetic. It is what happens when a family's rent is 1/3 of its income, and the only asset it can subdivide further is time. Out in the country, the same arithmetic produces a different shape. A farm servant, a lad hired by the year at a fair, sleeps in a loft over the stable, up a ladder, on chaff, because the heat coming off 4 horses through the boards below is warmth that costs the farmer nothing. In the labourer's cottage, the mattress is a sack filled with chaff or oat straw, refilled at threshing time when the fresh chaff comes in, and the light in the evening is 1 rush light, a peeled rush, dipped in mutton fat, held in a clip, burning for about half an hour, and giving roughly the light of a modern match held steadily up. Nobody sits up reading by that. So the household goes to bed at 8 in winter, all of it, in 1 or 2 rooms, and rises when the window is grey, and the night is organized entirely by the sun because there is no economically sane alternative, which means that in June, that family is up at 4, and in December, it is in bed for 14 hours, and the whole notion of a fixed bedtime, of a night that begins at 11 whatever the season, belongs to people who can afford to burn light. You can afford to burn light. That is more or less the whole of it. And this is the part to be clear about, standing here with cold coming off the glass into your face. You are not sleeping better than the woman in the court off Gray's Inn Road because you are more temperate or better managed or of a finer constitution, whatever the pamphlets on the drawing-room table imply about the moral qualities of a well-ordered household. You are sleeping better because you have 300 square feet of bedroom for 2 people, and she has 120 for 7, because there is a sewer under this street, because there is coal in the cellar and a servant to carry it up, because the sheets came back from the laundress on Thursday and there are 3 more sets in the cupboard, because you own a watch and do not need a man with a pole. Every single one of those is a thing that was bought. A cab comes into the square from the north side, slowly, the horse's head down, and stops nowhere, and goes out again the other end. You let the blind down. Below the landing rail, the stairwell drops away into the dark, 4 floors of it, and every door on every one of those floors is closed, and behind them, the household breathes at its own several rates, and none of them know you have been standing here. You go back to bed. The sheets have kept a little of you, and lose it again quickly, and you lie on your side with your knees drawn up and the shawl over your shoulder, and the second half of the night passes in the ordinary way, which is to say in pieces, without your keeping any account of it. Somewhere in there the wind gets up and drops again. Somewhere in there you turn over. What happens next in this house happens without you, and it is the reason the morning will be bearable. 5:30 arrives with no ceremony at all. There is no bell in the attic and no clock either, or if there is a clock, it is a cheap one that gains 4 minutes a day and is consulted with suspicion. The housemaid wakes because she has woken at this hour for 6 years, and her body no longer requires to be asked. It is the last week of November, and the sky outside the attic skylight is the color of a slate roof, which is to say no color, and there is a skin of ice across the water left standing in her jug from the night before. She breaks it with the back of her hand. She dresses in the dark, or nearly. There is a candle end on the box beside her bed, and she may light it, or she may not, depending on how much of it is left and how far into the quarter she is, because candles come out of her allowance, and there are 3 weeks still to run. Stockings first, under the blankets, because the floorboards are freezing and uncarpeted, then the stays, then the print dress she works in, the coarse cotton one that will be changed for a black one with a white apron and a cap at noon when she becomes a housemaid who might be seen. Her hair is pinned in the dark by feel. She washes her face and hands in water she broke the ice on, and she does not linger over it. Then down, past the closed door of the nursery on the 3rd floor, past your door on the 2nd, and the rule she has learned so thoroughly that she no longer thinks of it as a rule is that none of this may be audible. Not a heel on a bare tread, not the rattle of a pail handle, not a cough on the landing. She wears list slippers, soft cloth overshoes that make no sound, and she keeps to the wall side of the stairs, where the boards are quietest, and she goes down 4 flights of a house full of sleeping people, without waking one of them. The kitchen in the basement is cold and smells of last night's dinner and cooling grease. The range has been out since 10. She rakes the dead fire down through the bars, shovels the ash and clinker into an iron pail, and sets it aside to be carried out later. Then paper, then a handful of wood, then coal from the scuttle, and the flue damper pulled, and a match. The kettle goes on the moment there is anything to put it on, because for the whole of the next hour, everything in this house waits on hot water. While it comes to the boil, she sifts last night's cinders, keeping back the good ones, because a cinder that will burn again is a coal you have not bought. Then she blackleads the range front and polishes it with a brush, on her knees, before 6 o'clock in the morning, so that a stove nobody will look at will look correct. By 6:10, the cook is down, and the kitchen is no longer entirely hers, and she moves upstairs into the sleeping part of the house with a housemaid's box, brushes, cloths, blacklead, emery paper, a dustpan, the dining room grate first. Ashes out and into the pail, hearth swept, the tiles wiped, the fender rubbed, then the new fire laid, paper and wood and coal built up in the order that catches first time, because a fire that does not catch costs her another 5 minutes she does not have. The drawing room grate after that, the hall swept, and damp tea leaves scattered on the carpet runner before she brushes it, because wet leaves hold the dust down instead of throwing it into the air. The shutters folded back, room by room, and the daylight let in, such as it is. The front step scrubbed and whitened with a lump of hearthstone, kneeling on the pavement in the dark with her sleeves pushed up, while the milk cart goes past. The door brasses done, the bell handle done, then the water. This is the part that is worth slowing down for, because it is the part that never appears in any description of a comfortable house. There is no hot tap on any floor of this building. Water is heated in the kitchen at the bottom and used in bedrooms at the top, and the distance between the two is closed by a woman with a can in each hand. An imperial gallon of water weighs 10 pounds. The tin cans she carries hold 2 gallons apiece, which is 20 pounds of water and something like 4 more of can, and she brings up 2 of them at a time, so she is climbing the back stairs with a little under 50 pounds in her hands and no free hand for the rail. From the kitchen floor to the top landing is 60-odd steps in 4 flights. She makes that journey with hot water for your washstand and the dressing room, for the nursery jug and for the children's basins, and she will make it again mid-morning and again before dinner and again at night. By a fair reckoning, she goes up and down those stairs better than 30 times between 5:30 and noon, and the number of pounds she has lifted by the end of the week is a figure it is genuinely more comfortable not to work out. For this, she is paid £16 a year in quarterly installments, with board and lodging and her beer money, and the print dresses she buys herself. £16 is 320 shillings, which set against 365 days of work, comes out at rather less than 11 pence a day, and she is on duty from 5:30 in the morning until the drawing-room lamps are put out and the last order is given, which in this household is somewhere near 11 at night. She has 1 afternoon a week, from 3 o'clock, and every other Sunday after church. 2 hours separate her rising from yours. Those 2 hours are the entire difference between a cold, dark, unlit house and a warm one, and they are what you have bought. There is one more errand before the family may reasonably be expected to appear, and it is the errand nobody in the household will ever mention aloud. The chamber pots must be emptied and the slop pails carried down. She does this with a covered pail and a cloth over her arm, going into each bedroom quietly, and she does it early, and she does it fast, and the entire arrangement of the morning is designed so that it happens in a window when nobody who matters is out of bed. If she is caught on the back stairs with a covered pail by a member of the family, both parties look somewhere else. That is the etiquette, and it is a real etiquette, as fixed as which fork you use at dinner. The pail exists. Everybody knows the pail exists. The pail is emptied twice a day in every respectable house in London, and the correct behavior is to have no opinion about it whatsoever and to keep walking. There are back stairs in this house for precisely this reason. The architecture is built around the principle that certain kinds of work must be able to move from the top of a building to the bottom without ever crossing a carpet. You wake at 7:30 and none of it has happened. That is not quite the right way to say it. All of it has happened, and it has happened directly above and below and outside your door for 2 hours, and you have slept through the whole of it, and what you wake into is the finished condition. There is a fire in your bedroom, great this morning, small but properly caught, the coal beginning to redden under a layer of grey, and the chill has gone off the air nearest the hearth, though not out of the corners of the room. On the washstand there is a can of hot water with a folded towel laid over the top to keep the heat in. The chamber has been seen to. The shutters at the window have been unfolded, and the blind drawn up 2/3, and the light coming through is the flat grey of a London morning in the last week of November, more like the idea of light than light itself. You lie still for a moment before you move, because this is the best half-minute of the day, and you know it. The blankets are warm to the point of heaviness. The air on your face above them is cold enough to make your nose ache faintly. There is the smell of a new coal fire, which is not the smell of an old one, thinner and sharper and mixed with paper and a trace of sulfur. Downstairs a door closes with the particular soft click of a door being closed carefully. Somewhere below that, iron on iron, a pail set down on a flagged floor. The church clock has already struck, and you did not hear it. This is the pleasant version of a winter morning. It is warm, it is quiet, it is lit, the water is hot, and the fire is in. It exists as the last 20 minutes of somebody else's, and the 20 minutes before it were spent on her knees in front of your grate with a brush, and the 2 hours before that in the dark, in the cold, on the stairs, with 50 pounds of water in her hands. You put one foot out onto the rug and take it back again, and then, on the second attempt, you get up. The bedroom you leave behind is already the next item on somebody's list. You are aware of this as you go down to breakfast, in the way you are aware of the weather, which is to say, not consciously at all, and yet in every decision you make about the day. By 7 o'clock, the house has entered its second phase. The fires are in, the water has been carried, the front step has been done, and now the beds must be undone. This is the part of the morning that a visitor never sees, and that no household in this street would ever discuss. And it is also, hour for hour, one of the largest pieces of physical work in a middle-class house. There are 5 bedrooms in use in this building. Yours, the night nursery on the 3rd floor, the small room the governess would have if you kept one, and which currently holds the eldest child, and the 2 attic rooms. Every bed in all of them is going to be taken apart down to the frame and put back together before noon. The housemaid begins with the ones the family has left. The bedclothes come off in a particular order and are not simply thrown down. The counterpane is folded and laid over the back of a chair. The blankets come off one at a time and are hung, single thickness, over the footboard and the chair backs and the towel horse, arranged so that air can get at both faces of the wool rather than at one. The sheets are stripped and either dropped into the linen basket for the wash, or, if they are to go another week, hung the same way as the blankets. The pillows and the bolster come out of their cases and are carried to the window. Then the window is opened, wide, in November, and left that way. The airing is not a formality, and the manuals are inflexible about it. A bed slept in for 8 hours has absorbed a considerable quantity of moisture from the body of the person in it, and the theory of the day held that a bed made up immediately trapped that moisture in the feathers and the flock, where it turned the whole mass sour, heavy, and unwholesome. An hour was the general instruction. An hour with the window open and the bedding spread so that the air moved through it, and only then the making up. Some authorities wanted 2 hours in summer and no less than 1 in any weather at all. In practice, in a cold house on a wet morning, it was the housemaid who stood in that room with her sleeves pushed up and her hands going numb, and she was not the one who wrote the instruction. While the bedding airs, the mattress is dealt with. A feather bed is shaken, taken by the 2 ends and lifted and dropped, so that the down inside breaks up and redistributes, and the hollow left by a body overnight disappears. A flock or horsehair mattress is turned, and the turning follows a rotation, head to foot one morning, over from side to side the next, so that the whole surface wears down at something like an even rate and no single patch flattens into a permanent dip. That rotation was expected to be kept up every day of the year. A mattress on a well-run bed in this period was handled more times in a month than most furniture was handled in a decade. Then the bed is made, and there is a right way to do it, which is one of those small technical crafts that was taught mother to daughter and mistress to servant, and then almost entirely forgotten within 2 generations. The under blanket goes on first and is smoothed. The lower sheet goes on, laid so that the center fold of it runs exactly along the center of the bed, and pulled taut, and tucked in deep at the head and the foot, and then along the sides, with the corners folded into the flat diagonal tuck that hospitals adopted and gave their name to. The upper sheet goes on, wrong side up, so that when it is folded back over the blankets at the top, the right side of the linen shows, and the sleeper's chin rests against the smooth face of it. Blankets over that, each one pulled straight in its own turn, and not all together. The upper sheet turned down over them in a band of an even depth, and if that band is uneven along its length, the whole bed reads as badly made from the door. The bolster is beaten, shaken lengthwise, put into its case with the opening turned away from the room, laid across the head, pillows on top of it, plumped, edges squared. The counterpane last, spread and pulled level and dropped to an equal distance from the floor on both sides, and then the whole thing looked at from 4 feet away to see whether it lies right. Done properly, one bed takes something between 10 and 20 minutes, and the large ones cannot be done alone at all. A double bed with a heavy mattress needs 2 people, 1 at each side, and in a house with 3 servants, that means the housemaid and whoever can be spared from the kitchen, which means the morning has to be arranged so that both are free at the same time, which means the airing has to have started early enough that the hour is up when they are ready. 3 bedrooms and the nursery, with the airing and the turning and the sweeping of the hearth and the emptying and scalding of the ware from under the beds, occupies the better part of the morning. On the days when the beds are stripped entirely and the mattresses are hauled off the frames so the sacking underneath can be brushed, it occupies the whole of it. Your own work has begun by then, and it is a different kind of work, and the fact that it does not raise a sweat has never made it less like work. You go up at 9:30 and you walk through the rooms, and what you are doing is looking. Is the band of turned-down sheet even? Has the underside of the mattress been brushed, or only the top? Is there dust in the fluting of the bedpost, in the joins of the frame, along the skirting behind the washstand where a brush does not naturally go? Has the ware been scalded, or only rinsed? This inspection is the reason the corners are square, and both of you know that too. It is not affection that keeps a house to standard, it is the certainty of being looked at. Then the linen cupboard on the second landing, which is a piece of administration as much as a cupboard. The sheets are counted in pairs. Each pair carries a number worked into the corner in cross-stitch, and beside the number, in some houses, the year the pair came into use, so that the wear can be tracked, and the oldest can be moved down from the family beds to the servants' beds to the kitchen as dusters and floor cloths in a slow descent that ends in rags. The freshly laundered pairs go to the bottom of the pile, and the ones nearest the top come out next, because linen that is never used rots in the fold, and linen that is always used wears out in a year. You keep the count in your head and in a book. If the wash comes back 1 pillowcase short, you know this morning, before the pile is put away. The laundry list is written at the same desk where you wrote letters last night. So many sheets, so many pillowcases, so many nightgowns, so many towels, and against them, the charge. A washerwoman coming into the house for the day expects something in the region of 2 shillings and 6pence, and her food and her beer, and she will be at the copper from before 6 in the morning until the light goes. Sent out, the work is charged by the dozen pieces, and the bill for a household of this size runs to perhaps £30 or £40 in the year, which is more than you pay your cook. That is why the sheets are on a fortnightly cycle rather than a weekly one. Not preference, arithmetic. And then the coal. You look at the sky over the roofs opposite, and you think about the night just past, and about the child on the 3rd floor who was coughing at 2 in the morning and is quiet now, and you decide whether there will be a fire in the nursery grate tonight. It is a decision of perhaps 3 or 4 pence. You make it, and it is made, and nowhere in the world is there a piece of paper that records that you made it. That is the part worth sitting with for a moment. The account book will show the coal merchant's bill, and the wages paid quarterly, and the laundry, and the price of a new pair of sheets. It will show every shilling that left the house. It will not show the fortnightly cycle you worked out to keep the laundry bill under control, or the rotation in the linen cupboard that adds 2 years to the life of a sheet, or the reason the beds air for an hour before they are made, or the judgment that put a fire in one grate and not another. All of that is skill, and it is real skill, learned and held and applied every day, and none of it has a line of its own anywhere. The satisfaction is real too, and it would be dishonest to leave it out. You are good at this. You know it in the way people know the things they are good at, quietly, without saying it aloud, and there is a genuine pleasure in walking through a house at 9:30 and finding it right. The trouble is not that the work is unpleasant, or that the skill is imaginary. The trouble is the design, the entire purpose of every hour described here, the airing, the turning, the scalding, the counting, the water carried up 5 flights before daylight, is to produce a room that looks as though nobody has done anything to it at all. Effortlessness is the product. And when effortlessness is the product, the effort has to be invisible, and the people who supply it have to be invisible with it, and so the credit accrues to the house. The house is comfortable. The house is well kept. The house has a good name in the street. The women in it have no line in the ledger. It holds, this arrangement, for exactly as long as the money holds. Take away the solicitor's income, and within a month the servants go, and the fires, and the laundry sent out, and the airing, and the whole engineered version of rest comes apart, and what is left is the same skill with nothing to spend it on. But that is another night, and not this one. The nursery is empty now. The window is up, and the room is very cold. The mattress lies bare on the frame, with its ticking showing, striped, faded along one edge, where the sun has got at it in summers past. Over the back of the chair, a linen sheet hangs down almost to the boards, and the air coming in off the street lifts the bottom of it a few inches, and lets it fall, and lifts it again. The door is pulled to, quietly, and the latch does not quite click.